HolographicsMedia.com presents Beyond the Wall, a Game of Thrones podcast. With hosts Christiana Ellis, Jute Schubert, Vivid Muse, and Nukchus. Hello everyone, welcome to Season 8 of Beyond the Wall. Tonight we're discussing Episode 6 of Game of Thrones, titled The Iron Throne, with no it's done.
What?
We made it.
Woo! We did it, everybody! Woo! We came in for a landing. We're on the ground.
It was shaky. Shaky. I think it made
approach.
it without blowing up. There were survivors.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I'm Chooch. As always, I'm joined by Christiana Ellis.
Hello.
Nutty Nukchus.
Hi, everyone.
And Vivid Muse.
Hi, guys.
So yeah, with quick reactions. So and Christiana had posted online just non-spoilery your overall thought.
I found myself as the episode progressed going, okay, like this. Yeah, all right. And I just kind of kept doing that through the whole episode. And so by the end, I was really like, wow, okay. So it retroactively makes some things that previously made me angry and makes them make a bit more sense, which is not a defense of them exactly, but we'll talk more about that.
How about you, Nettie?
Pretty much the same. Like I've got my nitpicks, but there were a lot of things where I was like, yeah, that tracks. Okay. There was definitely, like all right, that surprised me. And there was one twingy emotional part for me, but I think with what they had, they did the best that they could. I think that they did a good job. It is a million times better than the last two episodes. So, yeah. And as series finales go, they did what they did. They didn't fade to black.
They did what they did.
They didn't leave anybody going, wait, that's how you end it? There's no... I mean, there are these ideas of like what's happening in the future and so forth, but there's no like, oh, but how can that be a finale,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Which I think is the big issue for sci-fi fans.
Yeah. How about you, Viv?
Pretty much exactly what Christiana and Nettie have said, definitely not a perfect episode as far as the episodes that we've seen before that are perfect, in my opinion. So it was good. I was happy with it, but I'm also pissed because I feel like we deserve more than just, okay, that works. Yeah, I'm happy.
Right.
I'm grateful that I'm here at this level, but I'm also salty that I'm at this level where I'm just like, oh, thank God it wasn't, like Nutty said, as bad as the other two episodes are. You know what I mean? It's like, we shouldn't have gone there, and it would have been, I'm just going to say this one time and then I'll let it go. But if they had done the full slate of episodes, like we all I haven't heard a single goddamn person besides the showrunners say that 13 will do it. We all kind of feel like 20 were needed. But, I'm a little annoyed at the choice because I feel like it definitely left it a lot emptier for me on a lot of the story arcs and the conclusions and things like that. But I mean, they did bring it home. They did. I'm satisfied with pretty much everything that they did. There were some that I feel like were just to like make sure that nobody could speculate. Well, maybe they lived after all. No, we saw them. They didn't live. Move on. You know what I mean? So I feel like that was just like closure, and also to show us why Tyrion was thinking what he was. But I mean, it was a good episode.
Yeah.
It was I'm going to say it a lot more, by the way.
But you know what? When you do factor in the fact that it was a season and series finale, they did a good job. They did.
I think so.
Yeah.
I
Go ahead. It's your turn.
Well, obviously we'll discuss lots of fine points. Normally we'll all say news bits, and these aren't really news bits. It's more like reactionary stuff from last week,
Yeah.
that was in the news. Something that we discussed was Daenerys making that choice, hearing the bells, and making that choice to burn the city down, and like whether and what the motivations were, and. Benioff and Weiss, or one of them, I don't remember which one, but said, I don't think she decided ahead of time that she was going to do what she did. And then she sees the Red Keep, which is to her the home that her family built when they first came to the country 300 years ago. It's in that moment on the walls when she's looking at the symbol of everything that was taken away from her when she makes the decision. So, yeah, in his mind, it's a rash decision that she just...
Well, and yeah,
turns on a dime.
it's.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry, I left out the cherry on top. Everything was taken her when she makes the decision to make this personal.
Mm.
When has this ever not been personal?
Yeah.
Well, right.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing is, though, I feel like even though there was some initial people really upset about the choice, I feel like over the course of the week, people kind of got past that piece. Not that they necessarily were on board with it being an effective moment in terms of how it was conveying the story turn, but I think people kind of came around to understanding that the foreshadowing and the motivation is there. It's just not effectively communicated in the moment very well.
Yeah. And it didn't come out of nowhere, and that she has always, this has been her answer to everything. That's what has always worked for her.
Right.
So
but
why wouldn't she?
It's such an illustration, though, of exactly what we're talking about. And when we say we wish there were more episodes, is that almost every failing in this season comes from a lack of just supporting connective tissue between these big events that allows everything to allows the story to support its own weight.
Yeah. Feel more natural. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so speaking of, the other tidbit was that there has been an online petition to remake all of season 8, refilm it, rewrite it without Benioff and Weiss, and it's reached over 1 million signatures.
Yeah,
So
those
silly.
awful guys who also made all of the episodes you liked.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Because like the first 3 episodes of season 8, I still maintain were some of the best episodes of the entire series. These are also probably the same people that want the Last Jedi and the Force Awakens and the Mass Effect to be rewritten. It's like, just shut up.
Somebody just needs to explain fan fiction to them so that they can write their own damn story.
Well, and the thing is, it's like I feel like there is room for a nuanced discussion of saying, like, media is not immune to criticism. It is totally fair for people to not like something, and it's totally fair for them to say so. But you don't own it. And the idea of you're going to make someone else remake it, like, it's kind of a joke, but I retweeted something right before the episode was, do people watch Misery and think Annie Wilkes, the Kathy Bates character, is the hero?
Right.
Because
yes, they do.
Well, in that movie, that's even an extreme example where, like, the author character is deliberately being a dick about how he finishes the last book. Yeah. Like, he makes it bad on purpose because he's pissed at the people who are such a fan of the character.
Yeah. And
even then, he's still, like, the wronged party in that whole thing. But that's not to say that people don't have the right to be upset that a show they liked before is going in a direction they don't like, but that also kind of just happens. That's been true as long as there's been stories. I really hated the last couple of seasons of Dexter, but I didn't start a petition about it.
Right.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I just stopped watching Dexter. Like,
it's for the best.
Anybody who knows my feelings about certain things knows when I stopped watching Dexter, and when I heard about the finale, I'm like, yep. And that's the thing. If you don't like how something goes, You get to write your own headcanon. In my headcanon,
Yep.
Dexter ends with the John Lithgow season. And
Yes.
that's it.
Season 5 is not terrible, but the show's never as good as season 4, which is the
Yeah.
John Lithgow season. That's
Exactly.
its peak. It's never that good again, and it's pretty steady downhill from there.
And I love Edward James Olmos, but
Yeah. There are good moments in the later seasons, but we're here to talk about Dexter now,
Game of
apparently.
Thrones.
Yeah.
welcome to Dexter Cast.
And so the last little piece was apparently after all of the guffaws with the Starbucks cup, somebody left a water bottle next to Sam
Yeah.
Kelly's chair.
Ooh, two
Two.
water bottles.
Yeah.
There's one behind under Davos's chair too.
So
Yeah.
silly.
They gotta
So,
edit that out now.
Yeah. So the actual show in the title sequence, I had heard that there was a change that King's Landing had a hole in the wall or something, but I didn't notice it and haven't had a chance to rewatch it.
You can see that when it's the exterior of the whole of King's Landing, it's kind of busted up.
Ah, okay.
So it's
Right
the
on.
steps that she ends up doing her flap on, and there's a big hole there, but there's also pieces of the structure that they're trying to rise and they can't. They're getting caught.
Yeah.
And then when you go over the Red Keep, you see the big crack in the map. And then behind the throne, even though there shouldn't be a back wall, the circle that had the lion there is shattered, and there's nothing in there.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Cool. I'll rewatch that.
Also, I want us, before we move on, to just take
Yeah.
a moment and appreciate Nettie's description of that amazing shot as when Dany does her big flap.
Right?
Yes.
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 I'm sure that's what they called it in filming too.
This is a sincere appreciation of that description.
There are so many memes already, and they are amazing.
As there should be, because that might well be my favorite shot of the whole freaking show.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's how good that shot is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was so good.
Yeah.
I just, my jaw dropped when that happened. I was,
That was
like, wow. That was really good. Anyway.
Yeah. Yeah.
And us and John were the only people who saw it. Nobody else in Westeros did.
Yeah.
She hadn't walked over the crest yet.
Hmm.
But the show opens with Tyrion, followed by John, surveying the devastation of King's Landing. And it's pretty damn grim, as you would expect. Women and children dead in the streets.
I want to just briefly touch on something that it continues throughout the episode, but I'll bring it up here, and then I don't know that we need to keep talking about it. This episode, compared to the last couple, had a very different pacing, right? It's much more slow and deliberate comparatively. Now, by and large, I actually really appreciated that. I really liked that. And that's always been kind of my frustration with the battle episodes, is that I like the quieter, slower moments where we get to see these little details. But one of my favorite sort of media writers, Film Crit Hulk, was talking about this episode in particular. It was one thing to do slow. It's another thing to have long shots where nothing actually happens. And it doesn't even have to be a plot point, but a long shot where it's a minute and a half and it is just still Tyrion surveying the destruction. It's like, did we not get it after last week? Like, do we need that much time spent on wordless viewing of devastation? And throughout the episode, there are lots of examples of things where, like when we have the time skip and we're cutting to Tyrion in his cell, he's got the big beard. Like, I didn't time it, but it's got to be like 25 seconds or something like that. That is literally just him looking at the camera, with nothing happening. And his face isn't even changing. And I was kind of, even that one is like, I like the slower pacing in general, but I was watching that just going, what is the show trying to tell us with this right now? It seems like they just should have cut about 15 seconds ago.
I just got horrified.
Yeah. So I think that by and large, I really liked the slower pacing, but I think that it was potentially overdone in some places where they did linger on long shots without really adding anything of value by lingering.
I did notice in this season, particularly, maybe there was a little bit of it in previous seasons. They did a lot of the soap opera angles. It's the and close up on this person so we can see their reaction, and close up on that person so we see their reaction. A lot of looks and no like talking, no action. And it got to a point where I was like, all right, we're in a soap opera now.
Mm.
Yeah.
And it was distracting.
Yeah. So in any case, Tyrion wandering through the city and seeing the horror. And I think to some extent it was needed because, of course, while we saw the horror in the fight last week, it is important to show Tyrion taking that in.
Right. Because John saw it up close already.
Right.
Up close and personal. Tyrion was down in the crypts. And the gravity of what he's about to do, right? So Greyworm's about to execute people, and John's going to try to stop him, but has no authority. No authority at all.
Or king.
Yeah. Greyworm is one of my things that I wasn't entirely happy with. Just because some of this is not really the fault of this episode so much as it's the logical endpoint of some things that maybe should have been better thought out a while back, which is just to say we have kind of now turned the two armies of color back into the dangerous other that we have to worry about because they're savages.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's really unfortunate that ends up being sort of the final take on those armies. We get a little bit of a grace note with Greyworm that I did really like later, but I kind of, I didn't like that the way the story had landed put Greyworm in that position. It didn't necessarily feel like it was out of character based on who he was or what had happened, but I just kind of feel like if they had approached it differently earlier on, they maybe could have avoided that unfortunate implication.
Yeah, I say give it within a month. Dothrakis are fucking up Westeros.
Yeah.
They're in trouble. They're in deep trouble.
Well, at the
especially
end,
with the Unsullied Army gone, and there's no Golden Company. So, at
the end, they show them getting on the ships.
Well, the Unsullied do.
No, they show the Dothraki. There's sound effects and so forth in the wide shot. When people are getting on ships, you're seeing Dothraki get on ships, and you see John passing Dothraki on the docks.
Yeah. Well, I guess I could buy that, in the sense that, kind of like the wildlings wanted to go back north. It's like, that's where their home is. That's where they know stuff. They don't they don't necessarily want to hang out in this place where nobody speaks their language and they're going to call guards and their queen's dead. So I could see them wanting to go back, but they didn't
focus on it.
They
didn't
even tell us that, much less show it.
They also didn't offer the Dothraki a place to go. They offered the Unsullied the Reach, but they never said, "Oh, you Dothraki, if you'd like to settle somewhere." No, we're not going to mention.
I'm just
and
thinking,
it wasn't even. Yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
For a nomadic culture.
Yeah.
To come to a land with wonderful horses and a temperate climate and nice, soft people to rape and pillage. It seems like a breeding ground. It seems like an invasive species.
Yeah.
I think that was true up until Dany did it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Well, it's not that hospitable a place if the chick with the dragon and all of them and all the Unsullied and everybody else at her side.
Right.
I forget about Marine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously we're talking now about something like that's at the end, but I think that there are certainly elements of this ending that your satisfaction level is probably largely dependent on how willing you are to let stuff like that go.
Yeah. Just cut it off here. Don't think into the future. Yeah.
To me,
Yeah.
the Dothraki was the same as the White Walkers to the point that they never showed us their motivations other than they follow the Khaleesi.
Yeah.
Because these are all new Dothraki. These are not the Dothraki
Right.
that were following her from season 1.
Right.
These are all the Dothraki that she, said, you're all my blood riders to.
Yeah.
After she burned the calls. So these are brand new Dothrakis, and we have no investment in them. So they might as well be, the White Walkers, zombie, the Borg, whatever. We just don't care about them. From a writing standpoint, this is what I want my viewers to pay attention to.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Totally.
Sad.
So I found
That's
out this is what the Queen has ordered. We should probably go talk to her, and we get Danny's flap moment. That was glorious, and of course was the first thing that I looked for the artwork for the episode, because that's it. That's everything.
It. Yeah.
So, who was it that said it? It was April O'Neil in the chat says flap is a very technical term. That's right.
Yeah.
That is the Hollywood term.
Right.
Everyone agrees it's awesome.
So well established that we just immediately went with you when you even, added to it with the big flap, right? Like, so, well, we understand what a flap is. And so this is the big flap.
Yeah.
So it's definitely,
the prestige.
Yeah. I think there were many things about this episode. Being subtle is not like one of its strengths. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that was really on the nose, which honestly I didn't hate, but yeah, her up on the stairs looking down at all the people. I mean, even with like the color palette and how it's all just laid out, like you can really connect some dots between like Third Reich imagery and stuff like that.
The passion of that speech.
Yeah.
And then it's every vision of the foreign invader. Here it is, right?
The fact
and then
that
you hear, Winterfell. What?
Yeah.
Yeah, the fact that she spoke to no one from Westeros, the fact that we've never seen those steps before, really. Like they might have shown Cersei walking up them, but we've never really seen the red steps or really understood the significance in the TV show. The fact that suddenly she's dressing like Cersei, she went from white and grays and a very light color palette to, as she started to go into her, after the Battle of Winterfell, suddenly she's wearing these blood reds, and now that looks like she stole it from Cersei's closet and had it altered down to her. They're not being subtle.
Yeah. Oh, on that note, I mean, are we, if we're going in order, did we kind of skip Tyrion finding Cersei and Jaime?
Probably.
That's important.
Did I? Yeah.
That happened before the steps.
Right.
Yeah. This was another perfect example of a scene where if you're in a mood to be nitpicky about technical stuff, you can certainly find some things in there, like they weren't really buried with that much rubble.
Right.
Also, it seems like if they had just been standing in another part of the room, they would have been fine.
Right.
So like there were some things about that, and like just the on the noseness again of, it's just the gold hand sticking out from the rubble, and that's how he finds them. Like, but if you're willing to just kind of say, okay, that's fine, don't worry about that. That's not important.
Little poetic
that's not
license.
What we care about. Peter Dinklage.
Yeah.
In that scene, he's so good.
To me, that scene is, yes, we know a lot of you really didn't care about Cersei and Jaime dying, and it felt underwhelming, and there wasn't that much emotion. If you didn't get the poeticism of them dying in each other's arms and comforting each other, we're going to show you how this affects Tyrion and make you actually care about their deaths. Because we've said it before, when it comes down to it, Tyrion is all about his family. His first love is his family. He tells Jaime last episode that if it weren't for you, I would be dead. Yeah. Jaime is his best friend, and when it comes down to it, whether he had a reason to set him free or not, he was gonna set him free. because it's
Yeah.
his brother.
Mhm.
So this to me, this scene is just showing us it's all about Tyrion, and it makes their death do something. He's walking through these horrific images, and you can see on his face, he's like, I can't. And then he goes and he finds his brother and his sister, and he breaks. And
Mhm.
right then and there, he's like, I quit.
Yeah.
I'm gonna die, but I don't care. I have to say I quit, that I am not behind this. And like you said, Peter Dinklage, I mean, he's amazing.
I
Mike
wondered if
says Peter and Maisie should both be nominated for Emmys for this season, mainly the last 3 episodes.
Yeah, I could see that. I mean, I think I thought for a little bit like they were setting Tyrion up like he was going to do more than just quit. Like
Yeah.
maybe he was going to try to go up to her back with a dagger or something.
Yeah.
I was afraid of that.
Yeah. I thought he might, although to some extent, I guess I can understand why. Like, although Tyrion has done some fighting stuff, I think that, you know, I don't think he had a weapon on him as they're letting him approach her.
He's not the
at
type
that
of
point.
person that carries
And
a weapon.
That too. And I think it's also, yeah, it's just he wasn't ready for that. He wanted to talk to her. Words are his weapon.
Mhm.
That's what he wanted to do.
Yeah.
He wasn't ready to just stab her yet, especially given that the result would almost certainly be maybe he would injure her and then they would immediately kill him. And then what? Nothing.
Well, and as Mike says, I love how he threw the handpin down the steps. That
Yeah.
spoke more volumes. I mean, if
Yeah.
he's going to make an impact, her hand throwing his symbol of office down in front of all of her people.
Yeah, I think that was so important about it too, because on the one hand, he could have done this in private, right?
Yeah.
Like maybe he could have tried. It was interesting, I thought, that although she did mention, oh, you committed treason, she didn't seem like this was necessarily an automatic death sentence.
Mhm.
Yeah.
She maybe was thinking, you did something really emotional, and now I'm going to make you kind of beg me to forgive you again,
Mhm.
like you have a number of times before. But for him to not only quit to her face like that, but make a show of it in front of everybody, he was really kind of forcing her to address the issue.
Yep.
Even if all she really did was say, okay, arrest him.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And I assumed it would be, I mean, I thought it was pretty generous to say arrest him and not
Yeah.
execute him, because she said the next time you fail me will be your last.
Yeah.
Drogon was right there, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I could see also that she would want to do that in a very nice public spectacle to add to that fear that she's cultivating.
Mm. Yeah.
Yep.
I think the next, so I have my notes are not perfect, clearly. I think it's next is John visiting Tyrion in the cell.
Well, we have Arya shows up at the speech and briefly talks to John before that.
Oh yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Right after the speech, where she shows up and he's like, what are you even doing here? I thought you were at Winterfell.
I love that.
Yeah.
Silently.
So just like you start to get the feeling that for the rest of John's life, he is going to constantly have a low-level paranoia that he's going to turn around and Arya is going to just be right there. She's just done that a number of times now.
I love that. It's just he's standing there and she does the whole Batman thing and he's all Commissioner Gordon.
Yeah. So I think that given the ending of the last episode, what with the horse and all the imagery and stuff with Arya, it really seemed to me like what they were going to set up is that Arya, perhaps in response to Dany either doing something or threatening to do something to John, was going to kill Dany. And I thought that's kind of what they were maybe setting it up. And honestly, as much as I love Arya, I was kind of hoping that wouldn't be it, because she did kind of already get a big kill. I don't think she really needs another one. It would feel redundant almost at that point. But you could also make the case of like, then why did this story even need her to come to King's Landing? But anyway, perhaps just so she could be the reminder, because of course, we'll get to it with the scene between John and Tyrion, but basically she's there to kind of just say, so we kind of told you, we were worried she was going to do exactly this thing, and you said, no, it's fine. And, we'll talk more about it, but I think John, I've never been one of the people who thought John deserved to be on the Iron Throne at the end. I've said so many times.
Agreed.
But I actually do think people were giving him a little bit too hard a time in some of the discussions I've seen of this episode, in the sense that it should have been more immediate that he was going to turn against her, and the fact that he took so long to do it and seemed so agonized about it. Like, the problem is, think about who he is.
Yeah.
He bent the knee to her.
Yeah.
He swore to serve her.
Yeah.
And not only that,
he loves her.
What he loves her, and also add in the fact that, does he have any perspective on doing something that everybody else around you really thinks is terrible and a horrible idea, but you know it's the right thing and you do it, and then someone stabs you in the stomach for it? Does he have any perspective on that, perhaps?
Yeah. You know what that must be like.
So the fact that he is now in the position of the people in the Night's Watch who betrayed him.
Yeah.
Like,
that's a really
not
good
a
point.
quick decision to make, even if you really fundamentally disagree and you say, that's not the decision I would have made.
Yeah.
In his mind, if we want to say he's always been the one that's like Ned, he's too honorable for his own good. Well, is it honorable to kill Daenerys the way he does?
Yeah.
Also, let's not forget, he was ready to kill Ygritte. He was ready to kill Ygritte. And he froze in that moment, and the little kid ends up killing her. This tracks. All of this tracks for John, in my opinion. I think the best part of John in this episode is him struggling with this, the duty or love thing. This is what his whole arc in this episode is. After he kills her, he doesn't do anything else. He is not even reactive. He's completely passive.
I loved, frankly, that the show totally just sidelines him after that. I thought that was fantastic. I was really happy with that decision. I mean, we're jumping ahead, of course.
I think that, as Paulette says, Arya had been kind of a fifth wheel since she killed the Night King. Her story ended there, but Maisie is too well liked to have just been left out of the last 3 episodes. Go ahead. If I may, I also think that this scene between Arya and John is more of the impending doom for John that they've been trying to lay in there, that if he goes south, he will die. If you go to Zahadum, you will die, kind of a thing. And she reiterates it again. You're not safe here. Starks don't do well here. Throughout the episode, we're supposed to really feel like, all right, John's going to go so that they can subvert that. Which I think is actually pretty well done. It wasn't a, hey, gotcha. It was a, we have all of these themes. Some of them will pay off and some of them won't.
Right. And the other thing I was thinking, though, is that a reason to have her continue in the story, at least through the last episode, even if, as we discussed, it maybe didn't necessarily need her to make it all the way to King's Landing. The whole bit with the Hound and, calling him Sandor and him basically telling her, don't do this, you can still have a life. I think that was worth having. Although giving her an ending where she's essentially going into the West like Frodo or Galadriel is a little bit like, does that totally jive with that moment with the Hound? I don't know.
I think everybody is too hard on that whole Arya aspect, not needing her after the Night King. And we were saying that about Bran too.
Oh,
and he served his own roles, even if you don't get to the point of what he became in this episode.
Yeah.
But I mean, I feel like it was important for them to show, because Arya was one of the first faces that we saw at the very beginning. It was, I can't remember whose chapter is the very, very first. Oh, no. It was
Bran
the
is
perspective. Well, it was Yeah.
In the show after the teaser of them going in, the men of the Night's Watch going into going north and seeing all of that stuff, what we see is Arya in Winterstown as the procession is arriving, as the king is coming. So yeah, in the show specifically, she's one of the first people we see. She's one of the first people we care about.
But to finish, it's more than that, because we've seen her go through these very excruciating experiences that built her into the assassin that was able to take down the Night King. We had to go through each and every one of those things. I would have felt cheated if I had not seen that scene with Sandor, knowing that they had traveled from Winterfell to King's Landing together, and that they had that scene together. And for me, the scene with the white horse is a lot simpler than what a lot of people, I think, were reading into it. To me, it was just like she all of that shit that she went through, and not that she could ever forget it or lose those lessons or those abilities, but she went through so much trauma. And I feel like that was like an outward view, what she went through in the streets of King's Landing as Dany, destroyed the city. That was like an external view of what all of the stuff that was inside of her. And I felt like it was almost like, not like a cleansing or a purifying or anything like that, but just like a total cathartic, emotional, havoc wreaking, almost died 1,000 times situation. And the white horse to me was her seeing herself again for the first time in everything that was around her and all the destruction, like the purity of that horse and her being able to get on it with everything else going on. It was just this whole, it seems like it was fated. Well, there were a lot of white horses in King's Landing. We saw that in the last episode.
Yeah,
right?
Like,
but I think it was very powerful for us to see that. And the white horse to me was, like I said, a lot simpler. But I think even seeing that, I feel like an idiot for not having this little epiphany, or maybe I've had it and I didn't remember it. But like, I was in the car and I was thinking about the episode the other day, and it's like something listening to some music thing, and it was, Aria, which is a term, it's a musical term, Aria. And I was like, oh, a song of fire and ice. So of course Aria is going to be remaining. She's going to be the continuing thing all the way through it. And so to me, after finally having that thought after, I don't know, 20 something years, it was just really neat to see that she was that final note for this whole little, because the episode had like the pacing that we were talking about and stuff like that. I felt like it was almost like told as a slower paced song, like a ballad or something like that, like you would expect after a battle, and all the battle scenes were like really fast paced and all that stuff. So that the pacing made sense to me as well, and I was grateful for it after the pacing that we'd had before. So I'm grateful for Arya. She was not a goddamn fifth wheel. I love you, Paula, but nope.
Yeah.
So I'm really grateful for it, and I know it may have seemed extraneous, but I think for the fans, and they've given us a lot of fan candy this season. I think that this was for all the people that wanted to see her come out of the faceless assassins and just all of that, And also, ha to everybody that thought that it was the waif wearing Arya's skin and that the waif would be sitting on the throne at the end. I knew you were wrong.
I hadn't heard that theory. That's I feel like that's
reaching.
It's also that's a troll theory. Like, not necessarily that people couldn't believe it, but that there's no way they would write that.
Yeah.
But in any event, though, I agree with everything you were just saying. And on the faceless note, one of the things that several people have said, and I don't think there's anything wrong with questioning this, is that a lot of people thought that she would have or should have used the faces thing to do some of the other things she has done. Because the last time she actually used them was with the phrase, right? But even though I hadn't put it together until after last night's episode, what I really remembered was what Jaqen told her after she did it the first time, which was, you can only use the faces if you are no one. To someone, the faces are poison. And if we think about the last time she used the faces was with the phrase, and then like, what's her next big plot point? She runs into Hot Pie at the inn in the crossroads, and they say, oh, no, they've retaken Winterfell. Sansa's there, and John, and they're there. And that's when she goes back to rejoin her family. And so I think it makes sense to say she's leaving the faceless stuff behind at that point, because she is not going to be no one anymore. She wants to be Arya Stark again.
Yeah.
So, by the way,
she keeps them in her bag for Sansa to find.
Well,
but,
yeah, that's true.
So that answers Dan D's question. Whatever happened to Arya's bag o' faces? Anyway, Paulette bowed and said, "As you wish," to this. I do want to say that I never made that connection. Arya, A Song of Ice and Fire, that Viv did. So, like, that is actually really beautiful. Personally, I always knew Arya would survive simply because George has said that Paris made him promise that Arya would survive, which is quite fun. But I think that Viv's interpretation is probably more accurate and much more beautiful than that. Mike says the White Horse scene with Arya to me seemed like her starting a new chapter of her life, choosing her life as an assassin and starting her new life. Closing her life as an assassin and starting her new life, eventually going off to be Dora the Explorer. I think that the way I read it when I first watched it really was more, there's death, there's death, there's death. Oh my gosh, this is something that's alive. But I also really like Viv's interpretation and Mike's interpretation, that, this is her starting a new chapter, 100%. Like, as I said last week, she's seen war, she's seen death, but she never really experienced this side of it.
Yeah.
And that has changed her more than anything. I mean, when you think of how little she was when she first stabbed the butcher's boy, and how she kind of, we talk about how Dany shrugs off death.
The butcher's boy was the boy.
Right, sorry, the stable boy is who I'm thinking of.
Okay, I just wanted,
my bad, I'm confusing terms.
No, and I hear you.
So like we talk about how Dany became dead to killing people. It was just whatever, but you can also go back and look, she's always kind of had that. And some people could say Arya is dead inside, she's an assassin, but this shows us she's not actually. And I don't think she ever was just okay with killing, but rather this is something that has to happen. And revenge was her life for a long time, and pro or con revenge. I mean, it was emotional. It wasn't a dead thing to her.
That's
it was
why
living. It was breathing.
Yeah. That's why we really did need that scene with her and Sandor.
Yes, absolutely. I agree. But this. Yeah, never mind. Go ahead.
Yeah.
I lost my thought. It's good. It's good.
Yeah. So the conversation with John. Oh, so go ahead.
I was just going to add something real quick about Arya. Her rebellion, so to speak, like, you're going to be a lady. And she's like, no, that's not me. That expanded into such a huge, bigger thing for her personality wise when the trauma started happening and the thing, when she had to leave King's Landing and then leave Westeros and then leave, Essos and all these things, or not Essos, but Bravos. And so anyways, it's like, if you have especially a child that's coming into like adolescence and you say, okay, you have to do this, they're going to rebel. And if you can find a way for them to have some control in that and feel less powerless, then it's an easier go. It's an easier path to get things to work out right, hopefully. But like for her, it wasn't just like, I'm going to rebel. It's I'm going to hide who I am because I'm going to die otherwise.
Yeah.
And I'm going to learn how to survive because too many people are not surviving. These little girls that are very polite aren't surviving this. And it turned into this whole other thing where it wasn't even just the I'm in control now. Nobody can tell me what to do. I'm deciding things. It was also a survival thing. And so her shedding that and being able to retain control over herself and decide, I'm going to King's Landing and I'm not even going to tell anybody because I don't want to ask permission. I'm not telling them I'm coming back. I'm not going back north until I have to, and I really think that she, in a sense, was kind of like even staying with John and Sansa and Bran just to make sure that they safely got where they needed to go so that she kind of felt free to do what she wanted to do even more so. But then I'm a long devotee of Arya, so I think a lot about her the most. So anyways, John's conversation, what?
So I'm not sure I don't know if anyone has more to talk about with just that conversation between Arya and John was a nice moment, but there wasn't a lot of meat to it.
Yeah.
I think it just sets up the next scene.
Yeah. Which is, of course, going to visit Tyrion.
Yeah.
Right. And Tyrion just pleading and pleading and pleading to do the right thing.
Yeah.
Reminds John of his oath.
Yeah.
The Night's Watch. Sorry.
I think that this scene was important in two ways, because obviously just from a character motivation standpoint, we had to get John to the point where a proposition had been made and he had to think about it, right? Mm-hmm. But also, I think giving it to Tyrion to be the one who expresses the show's new thesis statement about how tyrants rise, because when they're only hurting bad people, we cheer them on.
Yeah.
And how kind of recognizing how could she ever think differently, because her whole life has been about hurting the people that we also don't like. Mm-hmm. And we tell her, yes, the way you handled that is correct. Keep doing that. And so she does. She keeps doing it. She keeps learning the lesson every step of the way that she has to be ruthless.
Yeah.
That mercy just comes back to bite her in the butt. And no, you have to be the dragon, fire and blood. They can live in my new world or die in their old one. Like every step of her journey has been telling her that not only is she correct to do that, but that she deserves it. And that, for Tyrion to basically say, now let's talk about what that person's next steps are likely to be.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't have to be about blaming her or saying she is a bad person, as much as we have to agree what she will do is bad for the people.
Yep. And I mean, Tyrion throughout this entire series has spent his time trying to protect the people. Of the lords and ladies, he is one of the people who has actually cared about the small folk. He has tried to protect them when he was hand in King's Landing. He tried to protect them as hand to Daenerys. Everything he's ever done was for all of the people. Mm-hmm. And that is a really big thing when you consider the fact that he sat in the lap of luxury, a very privileged spot for someone who is, with his disabilities in that world. We didn't even bring in the whole killing of all the dwarves thing that happened in the books.
Yeah.
it really is something that is there's a few key things that come to Tyrion's character, and this is one of them. So the fact that what he thinks is his dying breath, he is trying to convince John to protect those people, the few that are remaining, when he says you are the shield of men.
Mhm.
I mean, that to me was very Tyrion had very powerful scenes this episode.
Yeah.
Well, I'll go ahead and bring up now something that I teased briefly earlier on, which was to say that some of the things that happened this time kind of made me retroactively more at peace with some of the previous decisions, because even when they were executed poorly, or there were stumbles, or they didn't really do enough to support the weight of the change they were making, I can kind of see the pattern now of how they were trying to get everything lined up for the stuff that happens in this episode. It was clear that they had this as a fixed endpoint and they were trying to work backwards from it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's an awkward, difficult way to tell stories. And I think that a lot of the things that we didn't like, or that just felt like they were executed poorly, the things that happened where our feeling was, it's not that we disagree with what happened, it's that how it happened feels stupid.
Right.
Yes.
Like, and so like the whole flying into King's Landing and losing Rhaegal to miraculous scorpion blows, and then doesn't continue to attack.
Yep.
And then the fleet is lost, but everybody with a first name survives, except Missandei mysteriously gets captured. Like, all of that stuff was clearly trying to get all the pieces in the right position, and it was awkward trying to get there. But we can see that it was all in the service of trying to get to these parts here that are more solid. And so, this is not a defense of the way that it happened before, but I get it more now.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, I feel that way too.
Yeah. It doesn't mean that they did it well.
Yeah.
It just means I understand what the plan was now.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think it was a pretty deep conversation, and it really was a direct response to the fans of thinking this thing with Dany came out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and it's interesting because it really does. It does raise some interesting questions about the whole series, because there were definitely times earlier in the series where people were watching some of the stuff they were doing from with Daenerys and saying, that seems kind of problematic to me. Are we really supposed to be looking at that as heroic? Is this really okay? Is she really cool? Like, some of this is maybe not cool. And, questioning, like, the whole bit when she, frees the slaves from Yunkai, and they all, the classic scene everybody points to of her being lifted aloft by, her pure white and them all brown, and like that whole thing. And it's like, retroactively though, now that we kind of know where the story was going, we kind of can't help, like, was that actually intentional all along?
Mm-hmm.
That it was supposed to make us feel a little bit uneasy? I'm not sure I want to give them 100% of that credit, but maybe some.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I thought that was interesting. I also thought it was interesting and felt real to me that because of what we were just saying with John, he's in this position where even he almost can't even bear to admit Tyrion is right, that he would not have made the same decision.
Yeah.
Because it feels like a betrayal. But it's like the thing everyone has to try to remember there, when everyone wants to say, oh no, what she did was beyond the pale, John should have turned on her immediately and quit like Tyrion did on the steps and all that. And I'm saying, it's like, think about everything that Jon Snow has done for the whole series. Does he seem like the guy who breaks his vow easily? In any event, I thought it was fitting. I thought that it really didn't seem to be working. Tyrion was kind of desperately feeling like, this isn't working. I've got to try everything. And then he kind of basically suddenly kind of calls on, is like, well, okay, you've decided that you can be at peace with her making these decisions and all that, but do you think your sister's going to agree with that? And do you think that your queen here is going to let that slide?
Yeah.
And at that point, John is realizing it's not just about him and his oath or his honor or whatever.
Right.
It's not just a tactical question. It is specifically your family is going to be annihilated. And the one thing that I thought seemed like it always should have come back up and kind of didn't was the idea that, like, I think they had just really settled on the idea that she was actually that in love with him, that even with the threat that he could pose to her, she was still kind of somehow hoping that he would be at her side.
Right.
Like that I'm not sure I ever I'll accept that that's what the show is telling us, even if I didn't necessarily feel it, like, because it was so quick. And again, that's a perfect illustration.
Yeah.
You know, if they had allowed that all to build more gradually, and there was more time with them together before he learns the truth, for example.
Yeah.
Anyway,
So, I also read that as she was desperate to convince him.
Yeah.
And that was part of it. So Paulette says, you know, all the precursors to Dany going full Blaze Queen, was that also in the books? And does it exist in the books? And some of it, yes. Some of it, no, because we haven't gotten there. I think that the idea that Dany might turn mad is even more heavily in the books. Because we get her point of view chapters, and it's a lot more of her internal struggle. And it's not like, is she going to flip a switch? It's not going to be like a switch is being flipped. It's like we said before, she's the hero of her own story. She thinks she's making the right decisions. And it's very believable because we understand her motivations. But right from the beginning, she's struggling with her identity, with who she is. And as things start to, you know, really combine and make it feel like she's destined to be the savior, she really, you can see her believing it even more. And I think it comes across even stronger when you see her perspective. You don't read her perspective and go, damn girl, you crazy. You know,
like in the scene that we criticized so much last week, you know, the bells scene, like, this is not to discredit Emilia Clarke's performance in that moment. But what we needed in that episode, in that scene, to really sell it was something to put us in her shoes, in her headspace. Whereas all we'd gotten for the last episode and a half was scenes from other people's POV being afraid of her.
Exactly. I agree 100% right there. Mike says, you know, you need to make that decision now. Was one of my favorite lines from Tyrion last night. And I agree. I think all of that is good. I love bringing back Aemon's words. You know, I believed John's struggle. And when, you know, there's somebody on Twitter compared all the men from Game of Thrones to sandwiches, and Jon Snow was white bread. He wasn't even a sandwich. He's just white bread. So when we're talking about somebody who really is kind of white bread, the fact that I believed his struggle, I'm going to give them credit. I'm going to give the actor credit. I'm going to give the director credit. I really believed that.
Right.
And so I there are some of the scenes, like this is one of the, some of the scenes from last night were so amazing. And this is one of them. That scene to me was just, it sold everything. There are certain things that I don't like about last night's episode, but there are things that fix it or sell me on it. And this is one of those. Duty is the death of love. Thank you, Mike. And love is the death of duty.
Yeah, I agree. I loved bringing that back up and then also flipping it that way.
Yeah.
And regarding the decision thing, like, uh, just to jump back in time to an earlier installment of something that incited fan rage, and then they went back and fixed it, which was the Mass Effect 3 ending.
Mhm.
We don't have to belabor the ins and outs of what people liked or didn't like about that. But one of the things that really resonated for me in that was really setting up a decision has to be made that is going to affect everyone in the galaxy. And there's this profound feeling in the part, of me as the player, feeling like my character doesn't have the right to make this decision for everybody, and yet
Mhm.
no one else can.
Yes.
So it's not about having the right to make it, it's the responsibility, because there was literally no one else who can do it.
Yep. There's nobody else there.
And so you have to have a responsibility to make a choice and then just own that it's really not fair for that decision to have to come down to this one person. It's not fair. They don't have the right to make it, but nobody else can. And having that framing on this for him too was because literally Daenerys was so paranoid at this point, like who else could have ever done it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
I agree.
Yeah.
I think we get the conversation with Tyrion, and it gets called back as John's confronting Dany, with what happened and what her actions were and what she did. And she shows no real remorse, she's just like,
none.
Hey, no, I am right.
Yeah.
This is the road, and everything's going to be great. And, that's where it really clicks for him.
Because
she's just practically like begging, like just note beat for beat reinforces everything.
Yeah.
Right. Because like what Tyrion really tries to drive home with him is it's not even so much about like you have to punish her for what she did. It's not about saying she did a bad thing and we have to kill her for it.
Right.
This is about what she is going to do if you don't stop her. And so that's why I think when he goes and he pushes back on her thinking, he is essentially trying to see, is it even possible that she might listen to reason and not just continue to repeat this over, entire world?
Yeah.
And
her
she makes it clear. That
it's her saying the people don't get a choice.
Yeah.
That was like the big one to me.
Right. And I agree. One brief note though, before he comes in, I thought it was really interesting that, way back in season 2, she had the vision of the throne room, the Iron Throne with the broken roof and the snow on the ground. And then last week, everyone was saying, "Oh, it was actually ash, not snow." And then it turns out, no, it's actually still snow. It's just winter now, so it snows in King's Landing. So that was kind of a weird.
It was a really weird choice. Confusing.
Yeah.
Really cool. The Drogon under.
No, I thought it was really cool that they had the snow there, but it was just that it created this weird sort of rubber banding expectation.
Yeah.
Can we mention that John's walking and you think he's walking by a pile of rubble? And then shake, it's Drogon.
Yeah, that was pretty cool.
I
That was
thought
awesome.
really cool. And to me, Drogon looked at him and was like, all right, your intentions are good. Like, and I think this goes to what Christiana was saying, is that he had not made up his mind yet.
Yeah.
Because Drogon did not think that John had ill intentions going in there.
Yeah. I agree. He did not have his mind made up yet.
He was desperate to believe that she could be talked out of this path.
So desperate. Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought, and I don't know if it was intentional or not, but there's one point in their conversation, Dany and John's conversation, when he's just almost pleading with her. And it's like this really, it's not a flattering angle for him. Like if we're going to talk about what the shot looks like, it's him. He's kind of sweaty. His face, the way the angle that they've got him at, he looks 20 years older. Like he just almost looks like Robert Baratheon for a minute. And I thought, oh my God, this is what it's going to look like in 20 years. If he doesn't kill her, he's going to be pleading with her and begging her. And I don't know if they intended to give that kind of like, this is older John, and he'd still be saying the same thing if he doesn't do anything, and stays with her. And it was just like, oh my God, it just kind of like shocked me. I was like, oh shit, he really needs to deal with this. That's not good. That's not good. Because he's not somebody that's very convincing. He's not very persuasive. He's very honorable, but that's about as deep as it goes.
Right. But go ahead.
Back rolling again just a little bit. And the lead up to her coming up to the throne, it was pretty chilling. I thought, after all this time, and it's right there, and she's finally, and she never actually does get to sit in it. I did find it kind of a slap in the face to the book readers of her describing what she used to think it would look like as a child. And that's actually what George said it should have fucking looked like. That was a slap in the face.
I didn't hear you, Chooch.
That what her description was George's vision.
Yeah.
That's what it should have been.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's exactly what his vision of it was. I agree. But I don't know if it was insulting. I kind of liked it. It was kind of like a hee. That's how it was for me.
That's how it felt to me.
I think that's how they intended it. This was a really nice nod.
Yeah.
But,
by the way, I love that this is the thing that bugs Chooch because this is the only book he's read. So
I got something.
But I loved it because, like, in my head as she's approaching, I'm just hearing her about to say, smaller than I expected, and then she goes into the story, and that's basically what she says.
Yeah,
I actually kind of really liked the slow lead up to that scene, because just one of the sort of things that it's not that we didn't know it before, but just to really appreciate as she approaches the throne. She has spent her whole life thinking about it, but she has never actually seen it.
Yeah.
Or maybe she was once in the throne room as an infant, maybe, but we don't really she wouldn't remember it.
Yeah.
So like,
and
I
this is
thought
the seat of her ancestors. Like when she tells the story of how it was made, it's not just a throne.
Yeah,
right.
It is a throne that her ancestral great whatever grandfather made from
Aegon
the
Conqueror.
The Conqueror from the swords of his enemies. This is like all part and parcel of that destiny thing.
Yeah.
I'm right there with you.
Yeah.
Mike McCauley is right. She did see it in her dream.
Yes.
But all the more reason that if seeing it in person is now just like it was in her dream.
Yeah.
Once again, for her, that's going to feel like this is all right. This is destiny fulfilled.
Yeah.
I've done the right thing. This is all happening as it was supposed to.
Yeah.
And, I think that, obviously, I guess we're not done with the scene, but I feel like she acted the hell out of that scene, I think. I think that I've seen some people have some criticisms about the overall storyline as opposed to like the scene in this episode per se. But and maybe we can come back to that in a minute. But I thought that her performance of the scene was really good, and I think in some ways, this is an example of when we talk about what does it mean for this show to subvert tropes, right? And in some respects, this feels a little bit of an anticlimactic way for her to go out.
Yeah.
But
sorry to interrupt. Mike just pointed it out. And then in her dream, she meets up with Drogo and her son.
Well, but she turns away from them
Yeah,
explicitly.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah. And in fact, am I wrong? I think she has to turn away from them on purpose before she gets to see the throne, I think.
I
I
think
may be mistaken.
I don't remember. I'd have to
I
watch
can't
it again.
remember the order.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. But in the
Continue, I'm
dream,
sorry.
her dream where she sees her son in Drogo, it is explicitly framed as, you could stay here forever, but no, I've got to pursue my destiny.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but in any event, I think
Mhm.
having this feel a little bit anticlimactic, I don't know that it's intentionally anticlimactic, because it kind of is the climax, but it's in a sort of slower, more deliberate, almost sort of poetic, mythic way, as opposed
Mhm.
to an epic, exciting climax, right? Action
Yeah.
climax.
But more Shakespearean.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that was kind of by design.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Um
And then
go ahead.
go ahead. Well, I was just kind of moving on. Next dragon, Drogon magically knows what happens. Their link
I buy that.
Yeah.
comes to
That
check things out,
broke
and I thought
my
for sure
heart.
John was dying.
So sure. Yeah.
I think John thought he was dying. I think
Yeah. Yeah.
the reason he's so quiet is he's disappointed that he did not die. I
Yeah.
think he would have preferred to die
Yeah,
with his
I
son.
agree.
Right. He's
Yeah.
got to be thinking, what could there possibly be for me now? It's
Yeah.
not like I'm going to
Yeah.
be able to hide that I did it. Although I saw some people talk about, like, when Drogon flies away with her body, it's like, of course John must have just directly confessed because he's John.
He's John, yeah.
Right.
But I was just thinking too, it's like, even if it was in his nature to try to get away with it, which it definitely is not, lying is not his strong suit.
True.
There's just a pool of blood in the throne room that's now only him in it. And
Yeah.
gosh, what happened? I don't know.
It was
must have been the
Drogon.
one-armed man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The dog did it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in any event, though,
Yeah.
that scene I thought was just fraught with tension of
Mhm.
not knowing what was going to be done. And I don't know about you guys, but I really loved the ambiguity of what level of awareness of the situation did Drogon actually have? Because
Mhm.
on the one hand, you could interpret it as John is this previously trusted person. Drogon did not see him stab her, and so was very upset and sad that she's gone, but had no reason to take it out on him because he was a previously trusted friend, and then was just
Mhm.
lashing out at something else out of just animalistic despair. Or you could frame it as a recognition that in a very real, although somewhat metaphorical sense, it was not John that killed her. It was the throne that killed her.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yes. And
Exactly.
so this was my emotional scene. So to me, this is where my heart broke when I heard Drogon cry out, because
Mhm.
that sounded painful. And I'm sorry, but did they have to pull the whole Star Wars Ewok scene on me where Drogon is nudging her like, "Mama, why won't you wake up?" Like, dude, it was like Littlefoot. I mean, I was
Yeah.
It's also
I was
Lion
wrecked.
King with Simba
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
Mufasa.
We've seen
Come
this so
on,
many
Daddy,
times.
get up, wake up.
We've seen this so many
Mm.
times, and it kills me every time. Like, I
Yeah.
don't even like the Ewoks, and it kills me.
Mhm.
But to me, this is what I'm hearing in Drogon's internal monologue. Like, I can hear this, and it's, she's gone, and he's looking at John, and he's like, "You might have done this, but if she just stayed with me, I took her, we went away, I brought her to the grasslands, I brought her food, we could have
Mhm.
been happy. And then she brings me here, and we go through all this pain, and it's for that bloody throne, like
Mhm.
that
Yeah.
stupid throne." And
Lost
he's
the
just
siblings.
so angry at the
Mhm.
throne because he lost so
Mhm.
much. And we see what Drogon wants when he takes her from the fighting pits and they go off together.
Yeah.
That he would be more than happy if that was their life forever.
Yeah.
And he's just so mad and he melts the throne. And my heart goes, yay, there's no Iron Throne.
Yeah.
We are done. That was such a great scene. I love that scene. I cheered when the Iron Throne melted. I was so happy. I didn't care that John didn't die. I really think John is mad that he didn't die. I think Drogon may have known, you know what? Screw you. You're going to have to live with this because I know you're in pain. And rather than kill you, I'm going to make you live with that pain. You have to live with that for the rest of your life, what you did to my mom. And So Paulette says, I love the CG work in this scene. They really gave me goosebumps. Yeah, Drogon's so expressive in this.
Yeah.
She continues to say when he does that one nose bump thing, oh,
Yeah.
and then Mike says that I saved him a lot of typing.
Yeah.
So how much do you guys think that John being a Targaryen played into that? To Drogon's?
To me, it was 100%.
Right?
John has complete control over him because of his blood, and he
Yeah.
could not do any. He could not go against him. I think Drogon reading into the situation gives way too much credit to a lizard.
Well,
Because these are not gourd-holding English-speaking dragons.
I know.
These aren't D&D dragons.
What I was saying is that I liked the ambiguity where you can't actually tell from the behavior.
No,
Yeah.
I'm not saying your opinion's wrong. I'm just my opinion is it's giving too much credit to a lizard.
A magical lizard, Chooch. Come on.
We'll
It
agree
was
to disagree.
amazing symbolism, but
Yeah.
imposes a lot more socio-political acuity in a dragon. But clearly what happened is at the last second, Dany warged and said, if I can't have it, no one can have it.
Oh, that would just be
I'm just
fun.
kidding. No.
There's no warning in the program. He's not a Stark.
Yeah.
At first, that's what I thought was that Drogon was like, well, if she can't have it, no one can. But I think it
Right.
ended up like his rage burned so hot. It was totally him being, fuck this throne. Fuck it. It's
It
the
was
whole
really
reason.
cool.
Yeah, that was
Yeah.
really,
It was
really cool.
Right. So I really liked the scene. I think it's worth talking about that. Like some of the criticisms people have about not necessarily just this episode, but now that we have sort of capped that storyline, addressing the storyline of we do have a bunch of men writing about how when women get power, they go crazy and have to be put down.
Yep. Yeah.
And so like I don't hate that the story went there, but it's not my favorite type of story that they could have told necessarily.
Especially not with their track record.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so it's like I can see it's not even necessarily a criticism of the storytelling as much as to say it's like, is that a story that needed to be told? And also just kind of a recognition of, you know, there have been some women who wrote Game of Thrones episodes, and the last one was like in season 3 or something like that. So like, which, you know, it's not automatically about this story being bad or even this episode being bad. I think it's fair to say I don't like that the story was about a woman who gets power and goes crazy and has to be put down.
Yeah.
And not only that, but it's immediately following another woman who got power and went crazy and had to be put down.
Yeah.
So it's like,
Although I will say, two people fooled by prophecies, like anybody that believed in prophecy or destiny, they're all dead.
Well, yeah. Ultimately, what it comes down to is that this story has so many complex moving pieces and interlocking themes that they really, I mean, this is exactly why George is having so much trouble writing these last books, I think, is because it's almost impossible to finish telling any one story without it having unfortunate implications in other parts of the theme.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, well, I can figure out how to make these characters have a coherent arc, but that requires these other characters to do things that messes up their arc. But if we do these characters over here, then it twists that thing in. And so that's the problem.
Yeah.
And so ultimately, this is why, like, there is no way that any ending would ever be perfect, because people don't all want the same thing.
Yeah.
And so anytime you have a story come to completion and be revealed in its complete form, there were people who thought it was going to be something else and are disappointed. Right? And that's always going to happen. And it's fair to say, in the end, I had hoped that this would be a different kind of story than it turned out to be. And I think that's a fair criticism, but it's not necessarily a criticism of the storytelling so much as, like, you just kind of wished it had gone differently.
Yeah.
Yep. So Mike says, but then there was Sansa at the end. Yeah. I think that's also, like, the one person that plays by the rules was Sansa. And the person that apparently needed to be raped in order to be strong. We've pointed out their criticisms of that before. I don't necessarily believe that is true, but whatever. Critics can say it. But there are things that I think if we didn't point these things out, I think we would be doing a disservice. It doesn't mean that we think that this is where they were going, but I think it is point to, all your faves are problematic, and Game of Thrones is very problematic, and it's okay to point these things out. The Eye of Horus in the chat says, at least Sansa is Queen of the North. Also, Arya pretty much saved the entire world by killing the Night King. Yeah.
There's no question that there are awesome female characters. We also got Brienne, who's also awesome. Despite the fact that, that, we haven't covered the scene, her big scene in this episode yet, but it's already spawning a million memes, as it should.
As it should, yes.
But I loved that, even though I really dislike how they handled Jaime making his decision to go back to Cersei, I don't hate that he did it. I hated the way they chose to have it play out.
Agreed.
And so, but that's just another example of, is Brienne an awesome female character? Yes, absolutely. Did the show feel the need to find her vulnerable spot and stick a dagger in it and then twist it just for fun?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, the show absolutely chose to do that.
Because they like agony porn. Paulette says, yes, Cersei and Dany meet, fall in love, and rule the Seven Kingdoms in peace and harmony. Was not going to please everyone either.
Oh my gosh, I so love that imaginary fic where we finally have this meeting where Daenerys and Cersei finally meet. It's the Dragon Pit one, right, where they finally brought. But we imagine that Cersei and Dany both kind of find each other. They keep kind of catching each other's eye contact and then looking away and blushing a little bit. And I just I feel like there's a connection there. And then maybe they, they start, writing letters that are just diplomatic at first, like logistical, but then they just start asking, how's your day been going? And
I love it. I'm here for it.
I'm good. I love all the crazy crackpot theories and spinoffs. Eye of Horus says Brienne got done dirty by filthy Jaime, though.
Yeah,
he treated her like a basic one-night stand, and that was terrible in my opinion. We agree 100%.
Yeah. So one of the examples of the meme I'm talking about, which was great, which was, it shows, her looking down at the book and writing, and then when it zooms in, what she has written is total fuckboy.
Oh, I love it. Sorry, I was now I know we're jumping ahead, but I was completely distracted while she was writing the book because all I could think is, okay, you're not set up properly. The pages are going to smudge. So don't turn the page. Don't turn the page.
Yeah.
It's not dry yet. Where's your blotting paper? Where's your?
No.
Yeah,
Well, we
Not me.
don't know
Powder.
I'm a
that
pen
the
nerd.
but we don't know that
That
the
there
show
wasn't a
didn't
change,
just
yeah.
cut out the amount of time that she let the ink dry
Right.
properly.
Right.
But anyway,
I didn't pay any attention to the ink or anything like
Yeah.
that. As soon as I saw the book that she was sitting in front of, I reached over, I grabbed Chooch's hand, and I just started crying.
yes,
I
well,
was
so,
like, she's the perfect person. She's the only one. It's it
yeah,
was
so-
I
Oh, yeah.
lost it.
obviously it's jumping ahead, but we're talking
Yeah.
about
I
this
don't
now.
care.
Yeah.
I
That was
thought
great.
that
You
was
invoked her
so
name.
perfect because not only like I heard one question about well, she swore to protect Sansa and Arya, so why is she a Kingsguard for Bran now that Sansa's going to be back in Winterfell and Arya? Well, so I could
Who's
see
left?
that,
Who's left?
right? I
Yeah.
could see the question, but I could also see being Kingsguard is that's the right place for her.
It's a
Yeah.
huge
You know,
honor. Yeah.
it's a huge honor. It's so noble. It was actually a different scene that we got to see Sir Podrick.
Yeah.
Right, yeah,
And but I really loved that with Jamie as incredibly messy and complex as he was, someone for whom he had these noble and selfish sides, and he could never fully reconcile them, and in the end actually chose the selfish side, but had these noble elements nonetheless. And who better to capture that and have it be such a payoff
Oh
of the
my
last
God.
time we looked at that book, we we had Joffrey looking
Joffrey.
at the book with Jamie and saying, yours is pretty short, Uncle.
Yeah.
And having that book have been this running theme throughout, and that was just such an amazing payoff to everything that those two characters had shared. I thought it was amazing, and I was a little weepy too.
I agree. I think that this just shows us Brienne's true character.
Mhm.
And she is the most honorable person in this show. And Ned Stark would go, dang, that girl's got honor.
Yeah.
Right.
I think also that I could not see Sansa saying, stay with me and protect me. I could totally
Mhm.
see her saying, we need somebody that
Yeah.
has your moral compass there, because
Mhm.
who was in charge before? These
Yeah.
are not the people we want in charge. By the way, I'm going to say it. Sir Podrick Payne. What, they're giving everybody a gold cloak now?
Look.
Brienne has to do all these amazing feats to get knighted, and this
okay.
guy just boom.
Well, but Brienne is the Lord Commander of the Kingsguard
Right.
and
And he
on the small
obviously
council,
did it,
right?
right.
Yeah.
But also,
And he
I
was
think
Tyrion's squire, so
Right.
he's been
So
with the hand.
I don't want to jump too far ahead, but the Eye of Horus in the chat says, but if she's a Kingsguard, she can't make giant muscle babies with Tormund to take over the world with.
That wasn't gonna happen.
So I was certainly a vocal defender of, Tormund would be a better fit with her than Jamie for exactly the reasons that turned out to be 100% true.
100%.
100%.
Anyway, but I liked that the show didn't force the love triangle cheesy resolution, which is to say, oh, well, now that Jamie's out of the picture, maybe she reconsiders Tormund and needs to be in a relationship, so let's go force that now.
Right.
I liked that they said, no, that's not the right fit for her.
I like that they are worlds apart. I also think that at this point, Tormund would be like, no, you left me. I'm not taking you back.
He'll get over it. He'll do okay.
Maybe. I mean, all he'd have to see is her beautiful blue eyes and her towering height. And he's over it.
Right. But, he is a well-rounded enough person that he can move on.
Yeah.
And he did moments later at that dinner.
Anyway.
The last thing I want to say about Brienne's scene, though, is if you notice on her breastplate, It's a raven.
Hmm.
Oh,
Which-
that's got to be Bran's new sigil, right?
Exactly. We'll get
Yeah.
into that later.
Wow.
The big
I didn't even
complaint people
notice.
have is why do the Starks all have the power, but Bran is not a Stark anymore.
Yeah. Well, that's. I mean, are we at that council scene now? I guess we almost
I think
are,
that'll
right?
No,
be
I
the
haven't
next
talked
one.
about this at all.
Yeah.
Oh, well, go
Yeah,
ahead.
we got to back up.
Thank you, Chooch, for keeping us on track.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I thought for a minute that I guess I don't know. The book, I thought she was going to be flipping through and find her page
Mm.
Mm.
and the start of her story, but it didn't occur to me that it would be her job to write it.
Yeah.
Yeah, the
to
Lord
fill it in.
Commanders usually write those, don't they?
Yep.
Yeah.
That's their job. They're the only ones.
Yeah. But yeah, that final kindness, he died defending his queen,
Yeah.
was just
Yeah.
says so much.
Yeah.
And if you freeze frame, there's like, oh, the battle where the dragon goes after the Lannisters. That's the Battle of the Goldwood. There's all sorts of fun stuff that you can find
Yeah.
in the other parts she wrote.
Wow. But before the small council, I think, was the dragon pit.
Well, yeah, that was the scene. That's actually what I meant with the
Yeah.
council scene.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah, but we go pretty much from the scene of John, killing. That's when they're bringing Tyrion out, and it
Yeah.
is everybody assembled. And I thought it was an interesting way to communicate the time jump to show how much like Tyrion's beard has grown. And I will say, first, I didn't mind it in the long run, but it was pretty jarring to have a time jump happen after that scene. Right, because there's so many things that we don't know about how that would all play out, and we get filled in, so it's fine. But I was just like, "Whoa, what did they just do here?"
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And then find out, John's not dead, he's in jail. I
Right?
did not believe that for
Yeah.
one moment. The Grey
Yeah.
Worm
Yeah.
would not have slaughtered John the moment he saw
Right.
him. That
Yeah.
no.
I felt that way too, and it was, but I could also sort of imagine the idea that Greyworm, despite in the last couple of episodes having been written as pretty much just someone consumed with revenge, which I wasn't really a fan of.
Yeah.
But
No.
but the truth is, no matter what John just did, same with Tyrion, they are important enough people that if you just kill them, you're basically got another war on your hands.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I guess we can give credit that, sure enough, like, we learn in that next scene that that's exactly
Right.
what would have happened if he had just killed him. But I
Yeah.
tend to agree with you that the Grey Worm we had just seen earlier in this episode seems like he would have just killed John on the spot.
Yeah.
Mhm.
John
Maybe-
did not even seem like he was prepared to defend himself.
Right.
Mike says, I'm glad there was dialogue specifying how much time has passed. I think
Mhm.
the time jump really was, you know what? We can conceive of a way that John's not going to be dead and we can go into all this stuff, but that's kind of boring. So
Mhm.
let's just do this. Let's just.
Well, and frankly, they don't have time.
Yeah. It was the last episode.
They still got a lot of ends to tie up.
The one piece that I really wish that they had done something to give us is how much of the city is left.
Mhm.
Obviously, there was a lot of destruction and a lot of death, but how much?
Quarter, half.
Half? Yeah, like I wish we had some sense of that, but we really got nothing.
Yeah.
I don't think we even see any small folk in the whole rest of the episode.
No, not at
No.
all.
Just when John is at the dock, that's the only time I think
yeah, I
that we
guess
see
there.
anybody else
Well,
out in the
and-
streets, other than the
and when
Lannisters that were
There's
getting slaughtered.
mysteriously two people all in black to escort him to the wall, I guess, because
Right.
like who the hell are those guys? Like,
No.
where have they been all this time? Anyway, whatever. That's fine.
Yeah.
So Paulette says Greyworm's judgment may have been tempered by just losing his Luftwaffe.
Yeah.
And Mike says, I sure as hell wouldn't want to live there. Yeah, that's true. I wouldn't. Yeah.
Mm.
They all got liberated by Danny.
Right.
Says
Yeah.
the Eye of Horus.
So, however long of a period it was long enough for the lords and ladies of Westeros to assemble, and we see a lot of familiar faces.
Yeah.
And we paused and rewind a few times because I'm just like, is that? And
Well,
a couple of them, we were right. Is that Edmure Tully? Oh my God,
Yeah.
it is Edmure Tully.
There was I think what I was frustrated by is that there were clearly a couple of people we had never seen before, or maybe they had been in the background of some crowd scene or something.
Yeah.
So
But
I
had
guess,
no idea what house they would even.
I guess it made
represent.
sense to have them there, but it did feel weird when 80% of the people in this council are definitely people we recognize and understand why they would be there. And then there's Sam thrown in because we like him, not because it makes any sense why he would be brought.
Isn't he House Charlie?
He's the head of his house.
Oh yeah, I guess that's
Yeah.
The
true.
last
He's
heir.
head of
Yeah.
House
He's the
Charlie.
last
Brienne.
one.
Brienne is Tarth.
Yeah, I guess so. I guess
Yeah.
that's true. Yeah, I guess that's fair.
I
So-
really
So we see the
dug
new Prince of
seeing
Dorne.
Sweet Robin again.
Oh my God. He gets the Neville
Yeah.
Longbottom Award, right? He grew
Glow
up
up,
into a
right?
hottie.
You know, I keep hearing that. I don't see that. I don't see it. I really don't.
They
I'm
didn't
like,
show him
Yeah.
very much, but I feel like if you look
Yeah.
at some of the stills, he's definitely
I think
not
it's
that
he's
same
just
little
not my
boy
type.
sucking on
I don't
license
know.
titty.
Yeah, he's kind of scrawny. Still, like he looks better than he did, but
Maybe it's just to me he still looks like a fetus, so I don't know.
Yeah.
I just anyway, everybody went nuts and I was like, okay, but that's me. But we had Royce. No, what's his name?
Royce.
Royce of
yeah.
what house? I forget.
No, Royce is the house name. It's
Royce
like
is the house
Waymar
name.
Royce
Okay,
or
Waymar
something
Royce.
like.
I was like Royce something with a W, but I was flipping them around.
Is Woken one of the names?
Did you say Vulcan?
I
Woken,
don't know.
Wolkan.
Yeah, maybe. I think Royce I just remember because there was the whole connection with that guy where we're like, oh, well, the crappy highborn guy who gets killed in the opening teaser of the series is a Royce.
Yeah.
And so like that's just some little bit of trivia when we finally meet this other gray hair guy. It's like, oh, he's a Royce too. It's like he's the family that's connected to the whatever, and it's fine.
Yeah.
Like we don't really care.
But
we know
We
him.
get a little brief Yara cameo.
Yeah.
And Gendry,
Mhm.
And Gendry
Gendry,
because he's House Baratheon.
of course.
Yeah.
And it's that new Dornish prince we learned so much about 3
Right.
episodes ago.
Honestly, like they had to have Dorne there, but it was a bit of a knife twist for me because I'm just so upset with what they did with the Dornish plot. It's like they could have just skipped Dorne altogether if that's how they were going to treat Dorne.
Yeah.
Not hired the perfect actor to play the prince. Alexander Siddig,
No,
I'm not
well,
bitter.
yeah.
I'm very bitter.
Now,
Yeah,
sorry.
it's fine.
I don't think I saw Braun in the lineup, which I think
Yeah,
they did
no,
to
well,
make it a
there-
shock when he shows up.
Yeah, I think that's exactly why. Well, also, I think he would not yet have been given Highgarden.
Right.
I think the only way that happened is after Tyrion was established as hand.
I agree.
Yeah.
No one else would have done
it. You're right. Yeah, that makes sense.
So
I agree still, though, that saving that surprise for Bronn was deliberate, though, for sure.
That was nice. I liked it. So Mike says, who is the guy they told to sit down? That was Edmure.
That was Edmure Tully, the Duke's brother. Yeah.
That's got to be a meme that's going to pay off.
I
brought a political meme with, never mind.
Yeah. The Eye of Horus says it didn't make sense that Arya was there. Starks got 2 votes. And Paulette says, would you tell Arya she couldn't be there? Mike says Arya was there to keep the peace with her sword. If you notice,
I don't think she voted.
Yeah, if you notice in the voting, none of the Starks voted.
Well, Sansa would have voted, but then she basically declares her independence instead. But I think also like it wouldn't have like it's one thing if it was going to be a tie and like an
Yeah.
extra Stark vote made the difference or something like that, but that's kind of not how it played out anyway.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think she was there because she was interested in what was going to happen. It doesn't necessarily mean that she had the same voting rights as Sansa did.
Mhm.
I think also at that point, the head of their house is in jail.
Yeah.
So there's no clear head of the house. So it's the remaining Starks were there.
Well, here's a question. I can't remember for sure. There was certainly talk of Daenerys officially re-legitimizing John as a Stark and not a Snow, but I don't think she ever actually got around to it, did she?
I don't
I don't think it was
that she-
shown.
I don't think so.
I don't think that she did. I think though that John being voted king in the North,
Yeah.
basically he didn't need to
Well,
be legitimized.
So I agree, but I was just maybe drawing the fine distinction between king in the North versus head of House Stark,
Yeah.
which
Right.
is
I feel like that's been
perhaps a
Sansa.
distinction without a difference.
No,
I think yeah.
That's
So,
been Sansa for a while.
yeah. I do think though that it was like Sansa was essentially doing things, but John was definitely the figurehead
Right.
of
Yeah.
the Stark house. Bran did not want it. Says I'm not a Stark anymore. There's all of that. And,
Yeah.
sexism.
Well, and it's interesting, obviously, given what happens, that like this idea that maybe he knew what was all going to play out, and I think that actually has led some people down a little bit of a spiral of speculation that I don't actually think is merited by what we saw, which is this whole idea of like, well, if he actually could see the future, is it actually sinister that he allowed all of this death to happen just so he could take power? And I'm saying, well, that's one way you could look at it, but we could also just say he was Doctor Stranging it, and this was the best outcome that could be achieved.
So Paulette says, and you figure by this time everybody has probably heard that he's a Targaryen.
Yeah.
Except it doesn't seem to be that way because nobody says anything about it.
I had the impression.
I thought that was weird.
I had the impression, even though they didn't actually say, but like kind of what my gut was telling me is that it was probably more or less an open secret, if nothing else. Like everybody there knows. But here's the thing is, I don't think anyone there, not a single person in that gathering felt like, oh, obviously he should be the king because he's actually the Targaryen. There is nobody there who held that opinion.
Yeah, that wants a Targaryen. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's no Targaryen throne anymore.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah.
So Mike says, wouldn't Bran have more of a right as a Stark since John is now actually a cousin? That was actually pointed out by Tyrion.
Yeah.
Tyrion said, Lord of Winterfell, and Bran said, I'm not a Stark, not anymore. So that's what we're going off. Mike also says apparently the only benefit of being a Targaryen was not getting eaten by a dragon. Yeah.
That's a good one.
As benefits go,
that's a good benefit.
I mean,
Paid off. Yeah.
But I think that I'll get into that a little bit later. Go ahead.
We get Sam suggesting democracy, which that was a great fan theory shutdown.
Yeah,
that was me.
Dealing with it as like making such a joke of it, like I didn't hate it, but I couldn't help but feel like that's a dark joke, really. I mean,
1%ers.
Yeah, I mean, see, on the one hand, within the world of the show, frankly, it's laughable. Only because, not because it wouldn't be good, but because the people who currently would have the power would say, that's stupid. Why would we ever do that?
Right.
And so I think
how do I know these people? Who should I know should be king?
Yeah.
Yeah, and so anyway.
I was cheering it. I absolutely loved it. And I was waiting for Sam to say, and for that matter, why should it be a king? Why can't it be a committee? Why
Yeah,
can't we
yeah.
have like a governing body? And I was
Mhm.
like all there. And their reaction to it makes sense. But I'm like, I'm with Sam.
Yeah.
But here's my thing. I could see they choose who leads now can feed into one day
Yeah.
establishing, and Bran's going to live a long time. He's a three-eyed raven.
Mhm.
So I could see, 50 years, 100 years, them establishing a new form of government, and that would
Yeah.
make me very happy. There are a couple things that they left open-ended that I can still speculate about, and that makes me happy. Teal Wolf came to the chat. Welcome back. I'm so glad you joined us for the last episode. Said Jan Royce was the one, the father of Waymore Royce, which was the crow that died to a walker in episode 1. Thank you so much for those names. But I loved it. And honestly, their reaction, what should I give my dog a vote to, really tells you what the lords and ladies think of the small folk. And the one time I want a reaction, they don't give it to me because there's somebody on that council there that was small folk up until 2 episodes ago. Why didn't I see a reaction from Gendry? Like, no, that sounds legit.
Well, also Yara, who's from a place that literally does Kingsmoot, which is essentially everybody voting.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, where's Yara's reaction? And I'm gonna get steamed about Yara later in a minute. Not reacting, but yeah.
Well,
but we just don't have enough time for that kind of discussion.
Well,
right? I mean, the show didn't.
No time for a Kingsmoot. Yeah, I agree. You're right.
Well,
it's a show.
So what I will say that like about the proposition of Bran, I was astounded because I was surprised. I thought that even just trying not to speculate, that I had kind of played out all the different options. And honestly, I had never considered this.
Somebody had said it to me, and I said, that's impossible. He's the three-eyed raven.
Yeah. Well, and here's the thing is that I've definitely seen some people criticize it because they're wanting to say other people have just as good as stories as Bran. Like, why is it not Sansa? Why wasn't it not so-and-so? And I'm saying the problem is Bran does have a good story, but the thing is, the reason he's the perfect choice in this circumstance is he is the one that everyone would agree to.
Yes. Yeah.
Right.
Because if you try to say Sansa because we think she's got a great story and would be a good leader, does that mean that everybody else is going to agree to that? No way in hell. Not to mention the fact that Sansa doesn't want that. She wants the North to be separate, right?
Yeah.
So I think that Bran, having already separated himself mentally from the Stark family, obviously still having connections there, but like, why do you think I came all this way? Is such a perfect response to that.
Right.
Like, that's another thing that's been a meme too, by the way, which is great. But that was one of the things that really kind of had my jaw drop, because it was this recognition of both. Not only was it something that I had not even predicted as a possibility, much less considered to be likely, but it also kind of really makes sense. Because, some people have also criticized this, like, well, they make a big deal about how he can't have children, which I want to come back to in a second, and say, but that just means they're kicking the can down a few years, is that next time it's just going to be a succession war again. Like, even if they say the committee's going to pick, they're going to all want it to be them. As soon as you don't have a perfect person anymore, it's just going to be fighting again. But I think one of the things that makes that a little bit different is that you are in a position where you actually are going to have the person in charge for probably a while actually is invested in having that continue and would be working towards this idea of, we're going to try to, he's calm, he's committed to this new approach, he can see the freaking future. And and maybe he's going to try to help that process along. It's a little bit like One Last Time in Hamilton. It's George Washington is like, we're going to teach him how to say goodbye. It's like you have to have the person who's willing to relinquish the power to do it first to show that. Anyway.
So Paulette says, Bran has all the dirt on everyone there.
Yeah.
Past, present, and future dirt.
Yeah.
Dan D says, Bran's dispassion might be his greatest asset. And I think of all of my nitpicks about Bran should not be king, that is why I believe that he is perfect to be king right now, is because he is not emotionally tied. He doesn't have these selfish motivations. He doesn't have revenge. He doesn't have lust for power. He doesn't have all of these things that like really, I mean, he looked at the guy that threw him out the window and was like, yeah, the most he did was stare at him. The most he does it to anyone is stare at them. I think that that makes him the most fitting, the most level-headed, and I can foresee him grooming somebody to take his place and choosing a successor.
Yeah.
And again, I think also the fact that he's the three-eyed raven, he's gonna have a lot of time to establish a government that and find somebody, and using his three-eyed raven powers the way that the old three-eyed raven found him, he'll be able to find somebody who has the least selfish motives and the right goals. My big objection is, okay, now that the White Walkers are gone, why hasn't he gone back up to the tree? Isn't that what the Raven's supposed to be doing? Like,
well,
if he's
no, not
supposed to
necessarily.
be-
That tree got destroyed and burned by the White Walkers when they chased everyone out.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right, thank you. I completely forgot about that. Because the whole
there
thing
is a
is
Godswood in King's Landing, unless Danny burned it.
No, Danny didn't burn it. And there are other trees, but that tree was special. But the thing is, it's like, if our stories are so important to us, and that's why the Night King wanted to kill him, and that's why it's important that the holder of our stories, the argument, I love the memes. I do. I will go all for them. Bran has the most interesting story. Arya steps up. Excuse me? But it's not that he has the most interesting story. It's that he has all the stories. He is the story keeper, and that's why he's important.
Yeah.
Tyrion's just telling the world his important story. But I think that where was I going? Oh, that I thought the three-eyed raven was supposed to be completely disconnected from the world in order to be the keeper of the stories. I'm going to hope that maybe he uses this whole being a king thing as finding the next three-eyed raven, and that'll be the next person that can then take over not just the three-eyed raven, but also being in charge of the council that actually runs the kingdom. The Eye of Horus says, I wonder what Bran's plan for Drogon is when he said he was going to try and find him. Oh, there's so much headcanon there for me. Mike McCauley says, Bran be creeping.
Yeah. Another meme that I did see that I thought was funny is, once again, a great old one has used its eldritch powers to manipulate the wills of mere mortals to seize power. To the coming 1,000 years of darkness.
Yep. Oh, there's so much fun. There's so much fun in this.
I will, so just the idea that, that's one of the things, I was so pleasantly surprised throughout much of the episode, but to really pull off something like that, I can hardly think of a story that has done that for me, where something really feels like I had no idea. I did not see that coming at all, even as a possibility. And yet, now that it's been suggested, it seems perfect in some respects. But it's like what you were just saying, Nutty, is that it's not that she does have the best story. It is a story that is the sales pitch to the realm for why this guy should be king. And also, he is a person that we can all agree on. He is pepperoni on the pizza. Right? He is like,
no more wars with this guy.
Well, or at least fewer, hopefully.
Well, yeah, but I mean,
Yeah.
there's not anybody that will start a war over Bran being king where they would
Right.
if it were someone like I think they would revolt against Tyrion being king, for
Yeah.
instance.
Yeah.
So
Oh,
go ahead. No.
I was going to move on to the next bit, which is that they're all doing the vote, but then Sansa is bucking the trend and gets
Mhm.
permission. Oh, did you have
So
something?
yeah,
before
I
that?
wanted to go back just a
Okay.
little to the Edmure thing. I loved every bit of that, and
Yeah.
I think it's more than just comic relief. I think one part of it is, who's this guy? Oh, there's fish there. Okay, that is Edmure. But him trying to talk about his great achievements, and we're all like, dude, you spent all the wars like as a prisoner with your wife. You couldn't even light your father's funeral pyre. Like,
Yeah.
what?
The
Oh,
scene that
Eddie.
we meet him
Yeah.
is where the Blackfish is chewing him out for losing a bunch of men taking a windmill that they don't have any use for.
Exactly. Yeah. Everything. And then Sansa just, Uncle, sit down. And that to me just kind of sets the tone. And it kind of quashes pretty much any of these other upstart lords who might think, oh, maybe I should be in charge, are going to just sit there and go, oh, that tall redhead, she's going to shade me right out of this. I can't stand up. I can't. She's just going to shut me up. And I thought that was such a masterstroke. That is one of my highlights. So
It's
they're
good.
voting.
It was nice to suddenly see him again and just go, oh, yeah.
Yeah. Oh,
We
yeah.
last saw him
You
when
exist.
he worked with Jaime to allow the Lannisters to take his ancestral home.
Yeah.
To be fair, without loss of life, but well, except for the Blackfish. I guess the Blackfish died.
Yeah.
So technically speaking, when Brienne wrote in the book that Jaime managed to take River Run without loss of life, it's not 100% true. But anyway.
And Dan D says, and then when Edmure turns to sit down and his sword gets caught on the chair, it's because he doesn't know how to use a sword. It's just there for decoration.
Oh my God, that was
It's
great.
fantastic.
Right. But so like one of the other sort of like common points when in this is, when Sansa decides that, like, hey, I said it to Daenerys before, and it's not that I'm not changing my mind about it now. When the North picked John to be the king in the North, there was an understanding that it was for the specific purpose of we don't ever want to be ruled by anyone else again. And so we're not going to do it now. And then they kind of get the go-ahead to do that. And that's where it would make sense in theory for Dorne and the Iron Islands, especially to say, is that allowed? We're doing that now?
Yeah.
This is my big anger. There's no reason for the Iron Islands to be part of the Six Kingdoms. There is no reason for Yara to go, okay, she can be king, can be ruler, but I can't. There's no, like, the Iron Islands aren't even part of the continent. They have a completely different culture, a completely different structure. It doesn't.
But they don't have any resources.
Well, that's what I was going to chime in. I think that's the key, Chooch, is that their whole way of life was 100% dependent on raiding because the islands are not self-sufficient.
Yeah.
And so if they're not going to be permitted to continue raiding, which is part of what Yara had agreed with Daenerys, and so theoretically it's not still on, but is it? So the point is that perhaps if she is committed to not continuing this raiding lifestyle, they do actually need support from the rest of the kingdoms.
Yeah.
All right. And then Dorne, I mean, they've been pretty, especially in the show, pretty independent. They have their own industry. It takes a long trek to get to them, and they've never given up their titles as princes. So and princesses. So I mean, it just, to me, that's my big nitpick, that they're not like, I mean, because especially going back to the Iron Islands, I just want to say, like, that's been their whole thing. Their
Yeah.
whole thing from get-go. The reason why Theon was there is because they tried to break off and be independent.
Well, yeah, but one of the big lessons of the series was how stupid they were for trying to
This is
become
true.
independent.
Yeah. No, I agree.
And it was a
I'm
huge
just
mistake.
saying.
Yeah.
And then to see Bran, who didn't pay any iron price, but
Yeah.
but
Yeah, so I
those
like
are my big nitpicks. I'm gonna hand wave it,
yeah.
but it pissed me off. Like, even if it doesn't make sense and story wise, and especially in the show, Yara's stupid enough that I think she would
Well,
still argue.
I think
Yara's not
that
Asha.
this is an example, though, of something where people might call that a plot hole, but I would say it's not a plot hole. We just don't see a scene where they talk about it.
Right. Yeah.
For all we know, there had already been back channel negotiations, and the reason they didn't say anything is because they already understood that there was going to be certain arrangements being made, or maybe they just figured it was not the time and they're going to bring up separate arrangements later. It doesn't matter, really.
Yeah.
That's not the story that we're interested in right now. So why waste time on it? And so
when you're talking about Brexit, nobody cares if Greece and France still want to be in the EU. I gotcha. But yeah, I dig that Sansa stood up and was like, yeah, I don't care that you're my brother. I still want to be independent.
Mhm.
And I think that is cool. I think it's more of a payoff for book readers. I'm not sure. Maybe Chooch, you can tell me if that feels like it's earned or a payoff. But I just feel like there's so much in the book about how the North was the last to bend the knee and they really are separate. And, and by the way, Winterfell is now officially Canada. Just saying.
Well, okay, but what about north of Winterfell? You still got, north of the wall, wildlings going back up there, and well, yeah. So, I don't know if we're done with that scene. Are we ready to move on to John learning his deal or what?
Yeah. That's what I think. Yeah.
Maybe we can just briefly touch on the idea of Tyrion as hand and this idea of him kind of saying, I used to feel like I would be good at that, but I'm not so sure anymore. And I liked Bran kind of saying, that's why you're going to work extra hard to fix all those mistakes. Yeah. And Tyrion's just like, well, okay. That doesn't sound fun anymore.
I like that him being the hand is his punishment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That is justice. Like, you can see Greyworm like, wait, what? Are you kidding me?
Well,
but that's
honestly, Greyworm really got the short end of the stick in this episode because they wrote the last couple of episodes setting up, like, to be fair, yeah, he's pissed that Missandei got killed. We all were. We liked Missandei too. We liked them together. It's a huge bummer that she's dead. But at the same time, they basically wrote him to be a bloodthirsty jerk ever since. And that's kind of a bummer. And even in this scene, it's like it's clear that he has enough tactical and diplomatic awareness to realize that a council of this type was necessary rather than him just doing whatever he wanted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I really appreciated that he got a grace note later. Mm-hmm. But like up through this scene, all he really got to do was stand there and scowl and feel like, like, I don't like any of this. And yet you guys are all talking about this as though I have no say.
Yeah. I will say the one thing that I did like about Greyworm in this scene is when they offered the Unsullied the Reach. And he's like, we don't need to be paid. Like he's insulted. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was really good because it's like, you think that we did all this for your land? Like, that's not what we were doing here. And you think that you can compensate us for everything we've done? We saved you from the White Walkers. We saved you from Cersei. We have been there. And you're like, oh, here's some land that nobody's using.
Well, and that's where maybe some of the others are going. And you're also a war criminal who slit the throat of bound, surrendered soldiers on the street after the fighting was over.
Yeah. But I mean, I I give him credit for saying no, that's not what we're here for. You know, I like his grace note. I like that they go off and they do what they need, but the Unsullied were used, the
Mhm.
Dothraki were used.
Yeah. I mean, I think that was the
Mhm.
one piece that, like, they dealt with everything with Dany, but it really just, they didn't ever fully grapple with that issue of taking these two armies that are people of color compared to the Westerosi white
Mhm.
people, and they didn't ever actually deal with those issues in a meaningful way, and it left some real awkwardness. Like when we
Yep.
noticed at the Battle of Winterfell in the Long Night, it's like, yeah, let's put all them on the front lines as the cannon fodder.
Mhm.
And now suddenly we're going to make them the savage invaders from the other foreign
Yep.
lands
Yeah.
and all of that stuff. And they really never, like, other than Greyworm, who was great for a long time, they never established really any personality or any motivation for
Yeah.
any other Unsullied person. And likewise, you know, the Dothraki became a mob that followed Dany
Yep.
because she's strong. And so the show really didn't handle that aspect well, even here at the end.
Yep, I agree.
Yeah.
I was watching an old interview with George at Brown University earlier today. It just came up on my YouTube recommendations. And one of the things that I thought was really interesting, and this has nothing to do with this episode, but maybe has more to do with how the Unsullied were set up and how the Dothraki were set up and everything, was that, like, for instance, when Dany liberates the people of Marine, in the books, it's multicultural, it's diverse. It is not she's liberating a bunch of brown people. She's liberating all different types. And he was modeling that off of, like, the Romans, how they would take slaves of the people that they conquered, or, you know, how after a war, Athenians would take Spartans as slaves, or vice versa, and so forth. And he said, but when they were filming it, they filmed it in Morocco, and
Yeah.
they put a call out for extras. So that's what it looked like. And then it continued to set the tone. Now, one could say it was completely innocent, but then they kind of leaned into it, and then they made
Right.
a point of it at the very first episode of this season,
Yeah.
and they did nothing with it. So it's like they went out of their way to say, yeah, we know this is an issue.
Yeah.
We're just going to continue to say, yeah, it's all bad. Like,
Well,
I just,
even with the grace note that Grey Wind gets
Yeah.
at the end of this, Greyworm, not Grey
Yeah.
Wind, excuse me.
was really-
Even with the grace note that he gets, it still kind of makes the sum total of the show's addressing of that issue as they will never be at home in Westeros and really should go back across the sea.
yeah. Like,
And
Westeros can't take immigrants, apparently.
yeah, so that's not great. And like, even like the whole incident with the extras that you mentioned is so illustrative, because on the one hand you could say it's innocent because it wasn't malicious, but what you could also say, it was thoughtless and
Yeah.
uneducated.
That's been kind of a
Poorly
theme
planned.
in this show.
They were not giving very much consideration to those issues.
Yeah.
And that's how those sorts of accidents happen, because they're not paying attention.
These are the same
Anyway.
people that
Yeah.
thought a reunion should turn into a rape that never existed in the books. You know, I mean, there's
Well,
all
and
sorts of things.
and the messed up thing about that example is that even when the episode aired, they're like, "What are you talking about? No, it was consensual." And we're like,
She's
"Did you
saying
watch your
no,
own
no,
scene?"
no.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like,
Like-
well, you know, you can kind of see how, like, right at the end, she kind of starts kissing him back. It's like, excuse me?
Like, that's
Yeah.
that's not even, like, okay if it was like a movie from the 1930s, you
No,
know,
no,
with
no.
a smack
So-
and no.
Right. So that's a perfect example of one of those things where, from a story perspective, you kind of just have to have in your head that the show did not intend that to be a rape, which is stupid because the way it looks, it's clearly a rape. And so it's one of those
Yeah.
places where you really have to just say, okay, clearly that's not what they meant And so the execution was bad, but so now we have to just say, when we're talking about the relationship between Jaime and Cersei, we need to not.
Yeah, that's not going to be
include
my
that
sticking
happened
point,
yeah.
but I don't care
Yeah.
what anyone says. That was a rape.
Well, no, I
yeah,
mean,
yeah.
as shown on the scene,
Yeah.
it's so clear that it's stupid for them to try to play dumb about
Yeah,
it. But
absolutely.
in any event,
But it happens
that's
everywhere.
tangent.
And as Paulette says, they're just tone deaf. And again, I think it's important that we point these things out because we can say we love things and we know that there are huge problems.
Right. Well, and so like to go ahead and cap off our discussion with Greyworm then, when we, they left him sort of seething, right? And then when we see John walking out to the boat and we see Greyworm there, I actually really liked the way they played it all out, because when we see him at first, it sets up this fear in us that it's like, oh no, is Greyworm going to do something here? Is he so mad about this outcome that he's maybe going to try to kill John anyway? But then it's revealed that no, he's actually at the docks because they're going to go to Missandei's home. Just like he had talked about doing with her.
Yeah, which is lovely. I do want to point out, in addition to what Christiana was talking about before, about how the Unsullied is like completely separated and not really a character. Davos says his name in Valerian and then says, "Did I get that right?" Which means he's never thought to call this man by his name before. He's never he's been with Daenerys for how long?
Well, Davos was really more with John.
Yeah, but as long
he was
as
John's guy.
That's true. But I don't think. I think to me that pointed out that nobody has called him by his name except Missandei and Dany, and he's never really talked to by any of the other people. He's not a character in that council's world.
Right. Yeah. And so I feel like it felt like a nice, graceful exit. That very last moment of it feels kind of nice for Greyworm as a character, and through him indirectly, apparently thousands of other people who all want the same thing, I guess. I liked that exit for him, even as I think we can all acknowledge that the show's handling in general of that army was not great.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Beep, beep, beep.
Eye of Horus says, I hope he's ready for those poisonous butterflies in Noth. And it's like,
yeah,
I think they'll be okay.
They'll be fine. They got armor.
Yeah.
So John, as the compromise, John is spared execution, but has to go to the wall. And I saw people confused, like, what? Oh, he's automatically going to be Lord of Commander? And I just kind of thought, yeah, who's left?
Yeah.
Well, literally, who else? Yeah, it's like,
he's going to reestablish it because there's probably nobody there right now.
Yeah.
I did like what Tyrion said. We're always going to need a place.
Yeah.
For bastards and thieves. Like, unless we execute people that are thieves, or people that we don't deserve an execution, unless we execute all of our criminals, what are we going to do with them? We need to have something that we can do. And that's what the wall is going to be. And
honor and being there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Although there's a teeny, this is another one of those things where a teeny element of probably unintended thing of just kind of like the question of what the criminal justice system is. Because we established that not everyone who got sent to the Night's Watch was sent there for legitimate reasons.
Right.
And so the underside of what Tyrion says, we'll always need places to send those people is kind of we'll always need to send a place to send people who are politically inconvenient or whatever powerful person has a problem. And, and that starts getting into questions about real world political things about mass incarceration, stuff like that. So, but I mean, I suppose, they just don't have like prison, but they've kind of like made that prison, except, and this maybe jumps ahead to like John's actual ending, is I don't mind some degree of ambiguity, but I feel like they really didn't make it clear what the plan was, because I think you had just as many people think, okay, well, John is now the new Lord Commander, and he is escorting the wildlings who want to go back north of the wall. He's escorting them up. And then he had just as many people say, nope, he's going with them to stay. He's going to be the new king beyond the wall. And I'm like, well, I guess I can't really say either way, because the show does not make it clear at all.
Show doesn't tell us, and then the question is, so is it a Night's Watch, or is it just, the traditional, the historic version of Australia, or prison colonies, and so forth. Paulette says, I like John's comment. Is there still a Night's Watch? And I think that was put in there because that's what the viewers are thinking.
Yeah.
We're all thinking, the what?
Right. Yeah. Well, and like to some extent, I think it's a real valid question, because even though ostensibly the long historical reason for the Night's Watch was against the White Walkers, but then what it became, because everyone started to, the White Walkers had been gone so long, everyone thought they were a myth. What it became is defense against the wildlings. But even though it's, there's a big gap in the wall, and the wildlings could come through that way if they wanted. And we've kind of had an amnesty, so to speak, of it's okay for wildlings to be south of the wall if they want. Some of them clearly want to go home, to where they think of as home. But nonetheless, the idea that the existence of the wall makes for a border, and that at least to some extent, it does still make sense that you need to have some sort of an organization there, which doesn't mean that it has to be the same type of military law enforcement type of structure that it had before, but just something to kind of just say, there's potentially still political tensions between the people who live south of the wall and the people who live north of the wall. And so it's not a bad idea to have someone there to try to put out fires as they might come.
I think there's something to be said for just resuming the things from before that didn't cause harm, that caused people to feel reassurance. And most of the wildlings have gone back or whatever, but people are still going to fear them because they don't, old habits die hard kind of a thing. And when you've dealt with these rumors, or they will be dealing, the common folk of, King's Landing and the rest of the Westeros, anyways, when they hear the stories of the Night King, it's going to sound like, grumpkins and snarks and things like that.
Yeah.
And so it's terrifying to be afraid of something that powerful and that unknown. So be afraid of the wildlings,
Yeah.
And so there's having that routine and that come back, at least initially, and then maybe change to something else that makes more sense, like you're saying. I think it all is just one of those things. It's kind of like why it was important to elect a king that was acceptable by everybody. It's like, here, let's just get all of these systems running again. It'll all be good. We'll get the brothels up and running. We'll get, all the ships going. We'll get the Master of War. It'll be great. And everything will look normal, and people will feel better, and they'll go back about their lives again.
Plus,
I don't think anybody in the continent would truly believe there were White Walkers.
Yeah, I think at one point people will think that the Night King was like Mance Rayder. I mean,
There was Daenerys Targaryen who broke through with her dragon.
Yeah, the number of people who literally saw a White Walker with their own eyes is vanishingly small.
That are still alive, right?
You have another larger group of people who saw whites at least, but not necessarily the White Walkers. But then you're going to have an awful lot of people who didn't see any of that. They just know that there was a big war.
And then there will be children and their children's children and so forth. Yeah. Much like the way the series started, where, the others, because they're stories that old Nan told, and they're not real, but they are. Mike Macaulay says, is it a stretch to think that the last two surviving direwolves foreshadowed how their human counterparts ended up? Nymeria turns away from Arya to go her own way, and Ghost ends up with the Watch up in the north.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love
It's
it.
sweet.
On the note of Ghost, I have to say that when everybody was so mad that John didn't give Ghost good boy pats when he left him before, and I was one of those people, the showrunners had to be high-fiving behind the scenes because they knew, like, oh, people are so mad, but we have the payoff coming. It's going to be so great. And it was.
Yep.
And I'll admit, the CG looked a little cheesy.
Yeah, it's true.
It's true. It looked a little cheesy.
There's speculation of, they were back there. Hurry up, get this in, put it in.
But
yeah, right.
I still think like he still could have given him good boy pats. I think that, Ghost should have just turned his back on him, but that's just me. He wouldn't have. Doggos are perfect and I'm not.
No, because they had this connection. They had the telepathic connection.
No.
Even though John doesn't deserve Ghost, we know that Ghost still loves John, and Ghost will be happier with John there, and them all going and being up north of the wall instead of trying to do something else.
Absolutely. Paulette says most of the people that saw the whites are on the ships heading east, which is true. I think that also this ending with John lets the show end the way that it started. Rangers heading into the north, heading north of the wall.
I will say that although I certainly understand the dramatic shot of having people walk away and then having the door closed to like close the shot, like I can understand the visual impact of a shot like that. I think thematically, I would have liked it more if they sort of made a point of not closing the gate.
I agree. Right. I didn't understand that. I mean, what are we stopping? Like wolves and stuff? Because all the really scary things like the mammoths and the giants, they've been all turned and killed.
Yeah.
Well, anything can just go, bust a little.
Yeah. So I wish they had done that, especially because when we talk about probably unintended but accidental implications, is that although I certainly like the idea that we have these wildlings where north of the wall, that's their home, that's where they want to be, and they were really only leaving because they were being driven out by this threat. And so having them go home feels right in that sense. But again, like the Dothraki and the Unsullied, what we have done is tell a story where everybody's happier if those immigrants just go back where they came from.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's like, you have to know they didn't set out to tell that story on purpose, and yet
they did.
And
I mean, but for their upcoming series, Confederate.
Oh gosh, no.
Everybody
their handling
was
of these delicate issues are such good evidence to suggest that they would be just.
They wouldn't have been building bridges to some
story.
Certain mindset.
Yeah.
So,
I totally thought John is heading north and he's not looking back. This is one vow he's not going to keep. He's got the true north in him. He doesn't need any of this anymore. He's gone.
I could certainly believe that, but again, like the show doesn't give us anything either way. So it's like.
So Dan D says it also juxtaposed the dead walking south and the living are walking north. And then getting to the show didn't tell us. So Tech has not been watching Game of Thrones since Theon's torture. I give him highlights and clips and keeps him apprised of it. And today he said to me, I've heard some theories and I want to know your thoughts. And everyone that he asked me, I gave him my thoughts, but I also said, if that were the case, the show didn't tell us. The show didn't tell. Like, these theories are fun and I could explore all of them. And you know what? You see me at a con, you want to talk with me someday, we can sit down and we can explore all these crackpot theories. I am down for that. I am okay with that. I will do that till the crows come home. But when it comes down to it, at the end of the day, we've seen the finale. If the show didn't tell us that, then it's just your headcanon at that point.
Yeah. Which is fine. Headcanon is cool.
Headcanon is cool and it's all great and fun, but it's one of those things. It's like, yeah, but they meant to do this, but if they didn't put it in, they didn't actually mean it, because they would have put it in if that's what they meant. You could say that they may have meant it and failed at execution. We've said that a lot.
Yeah.
But they got to put it in.
There's also this weird tendency lately with, it could be this show, could be the Avengers or whatever, but this weird phenomena where a story feels like it's been told in a satisfying way, and then the authors or the showrunners or whatever start going out and giving interview answers where like they take an elegant story being told and they distill it down to kind of a stupid point.
Yeah.
And then everyone's like, did you understand the movie that you just made?
Yeah.
And I'm sure that what's always happening is that you're taking an elegant, complex, nuanced story point and you're trying to make it a soundbite, and then the soundbite's what goes viral, and that's why it happens like that. But J.K. Rowling was the other, I think, example of that.
Absolutely. I was thinking
keeps
of that.
Volunteering all of these random bits of trivia that are really kind of off-putting.
Like, if you meant that, J.K., you would have put that in the book, whatever. But this reminds me of the big thing where it's like, so in this book you said he had blue eyes, but in this other book you said he had green eyes, and this was a thing that was happening to George, and he's like, what does that mean? Is like, I forgot what color eyes they had. I wish I never described anyone's eyes in my books, because there are little details that I forget. And he actually ended up having to have a continuity person, which is the people that run Westeros.org. And he's like, okay, check my facts. What am I missing? And then he gives them the proofs before it goes to the editor, and then they go, okay, this is what you've messed up.
Yeah.
Because and I'm sure as an author, that happens. You
does,
forget.
yeah.
I didn't write in my story Bible what color eyes he had or whatever. But readers, we're so passionate, and we read and we devour these things that they end up becoming bigger to us.
Well,
than the original
and the thing
creator.
is that lots of times, as fun as it can be to discuss these crackpot theories or these headcanons or whatever, when a show is not finished, it can be fun, but it also very easily can lead to a situation where you have been so convinced of your own theory that you get mad when it turns out that it's not true.
And then you do a change.org to get people to redo this.
But like, nobody did anything wrong to you. Like that, when that happens, people do it to themselves unintentionally.
Yeah.
But that's why, like, early in this season, especially when it wasn't going well, I kind of talked about how I was really trying to not speculate about what I thought was going to happen. And it's impossible to avoid that completely, but it was because it's like, I didn't want to set myself up to come up with something that feels perfect to me, only to be disappointed when that's not what they do. Right. And so the idea of saying, let them tell the story they're telling and take that in. But again, it's like, that's not to say don't speculate, don't come up with these crazy theories, just keep them in perspective. But like a lot of people, mad that their favorite little theory didn't get addressed or didn't turn out to be true or whatever. But where were we?
One of the almost the last scenes is the small council.
Yeah,
which is like pure fan candy, I think.
Yeah.
Like,
so on the one hand, I like Bronn, and I liked sort of the end result, but it does stretch credibility that Tyrion would be able to make Bronn the Lord of Highgarden and the Master of Coin, especially when Bronn explicitly is a character that is on the record as saying accounting is stupid and boring.
Mhm.
But he loves money.
Yeah, he does.
So if he's going to count anything, he'll count gold.
The only thing I can think that makes any kind of sense is that Tyrion maybe took this idea to Bran and was just saying, so I had a thought. It's a little out there, but let me put it out just to see if it can get any traction at all. But there's a guy who's very smart and resourceful, and he understands what it means to work for a living.
Let me stop you right there, Lord Hand.
Right. Hold on. You mean Bronn? Oh, I know Bronn.
Yeah.
I checked his
I know
references.
what happened.
Yeah.
So this is what if we're gonna argue anything, it's all right. We'll make him Lord of Highgarden. Somebody's gotta be. He's gonna hate the accounting part and just give him all of that, give him everything he's ever asked for, and show him how much it sucks. And Bran's like, all right, we could do this.
It's
Just
one of
wait till he
these-
starts
yeah.
dealing with debts and loans and interest rate.
Yeah.
Oh, he's gonna hate
It's one of these
So-
be careful what you wish for situations.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I liked it, even though it felt like a stretch to me that it could have been made to happen. But Davos has always been one of my favorite characters ever since he was introduced, even though for such a long time he was following the Danys train, which just felt like anyway. But Davos has always been great, and I am so happy to see him come out of this unscathed and doing something. He gets to be his grumpy old self, master of ships on a small council. I love all that so much. Davos is the best, and I'm so glad he gets a happy ending.
And he gets to be the master of grammar when he didn't even know how to read
Yes!
until Shireen taught him.
I love that. I love that so
Yes.
much. So
Mhm.
Mike asks, I must have missed something. What was the whole thing with Tyrion straightening the chairs just to have everyone mess them up? This goes back to Tyrion.
Tywin. Was it
Yeah,
with
but
Tywin
Tyrion and
was there?
Tywin, setting up the chairs. And Tywin sets everything up. And then Tyrion drags the chair. And
Yeah.
it's this long, prolonged.
Cersei and Pycelle, they all did a whole little dance to sit closer to Tywin, and I think he really wanted to see people fight to sit closer to him and be his right hand. And
Exactly.
of course, he had the wrong crew.
I attribute this to a change in Tyrion's approach to this whole thing. And so, like, coming from, the various performing things that I've done, like theater or improv or whatever, stage fright is a thing. But what I've always the way I've always approached those feelings is to say, you're feeling these feelings because you care about how it turns out, which is a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so you should use that energy to try to do any remaining preparations that would be helpful. But otherwise, think of those feelings not as a bad, paralyzing thing, but as a reflection that this is something you care about and it means something to you, and use that. But it's nonetheless, that's easier said than done. And it's nervous energy thing. And so that's what I saw this as is before, when Tyrion was hand, he was like, how cool is this? I'm important now. I have power now. I'm going to impress my dad. I'm going to dab on all these fools. And now it's no, he actually wants to do a good job, not for his own just power or self-satisfaction, but to actually do a good job for the job. He cares about it now. And so he's nervous.
It's possible now.
Yeah. And so I think that's what it is he's the first to arrive. No one else is there. He wants everything to be perfect. He's a little bit nervous. He's fidgety. And so he goes around to fix all the chairs because it's something to do. That's how I took it.
Yep.
Because he cares.
And then, of course, Grand Meister Sam comes in with a Song of Ice and Fire.
So I guess I feel like we never really got the ins and outs of how one becomes the Grand Maester because like, so in principle, my understanding had always been that the Grand Maester is not traditionally chosen by the ruler.
Right.
It is assigned by the Citadel. But that's not to say things couldn't change, but it's also not. What I did love is that he didn't have a big, huge chain with lots of links.
Yeah.
He had a little tiny chain. And so that was another one where it's like, I'm happy that he's there and that it seems like a fun place for him to end up, even though there's a bit of a leap for how that could have been made to happen. I'm willing to make that leap with the show, even if I'm certainly still aware of making a leap.
Yeah.
Pods a night. Sam deserves this.
Yeah.
So House of Horror said, wouldn't it have been awesome if Sam brought out the book and said, this is the first of 7 books. We're still working on the last 2.
Yeah.
This is also a throwback because when he's at the Citadel, he's talking to the Grand Maester and he's like, yes, I'm working on this book and I'm calling it the Wars After the Fall of the Targaryens. And Sam kind of makes a face and he goes, what? You don't like the title? He's like, I want to use something a little more poetic.
Yeah. I think that there were a lot of people who speculated that, isn't it going to be fun when Sam turns out to write a Song of Ice and Fire at the end? And I think the fact that he just contributed to the title of an already existing book that is immediately criticized by Tyrion for not mentioning him is, I think that actually fits better. Still
so
kind of gets at the fun reference but also feels a little bit more less pretentious.
Yeah.
Yeah, Sam wanted to be a wizard. He didn't want to be a writer.
But then we also have, Brienne on the small council too. And, just so here, this is a perfect example of something where I saw a couple of people whose opinions I do actually respect, who had criticisms of the episode, but in a couple of cases, they had positions on things that I just sure, it's subjective, but I just really fundamentally disagree with their take on it. And so what they're saying is things like, this didn't feel like an ending. It felt like just the story just stops instead of actually ending anything. And I'm like, well, you want them all just dead? I mean, if they're not dead, then I'm assuming that we want to find out what they're likely to do next. And isn't showing a little bit of a hint of what their life moving forward is going to be? Isn't that what we want? That's certainly what I felt like I wanted.
Yeah.
So to be disappointed that there's not some sort of a profound stopping point for their stories, I thought that was a really weird reaction. But, obviously everyone's entitled to their own feelings about it. But
I guess if you don't want to wonder anymore about these characters because you've wondered so much, maybe you want them dead so you don't have to think about them again.
I don't
Seems
think that's
like a long stretch for me, though.
Yeah, I think I don't think that's what they wanted. I think
I was kidding.
It was more just a matter of, I guess, they wanted there to be more sort of a thematic conclusion for each story. But I guess to some extent, maybe that's just an expectation thing because there's too many stories. There's too many interlocking pieces. You can't give the big thematic epic conclusion to everybody.
Right.
So I don't know. I would never have expected that to happen. And so I wasn't disappointed by it. And so I don't know. It's a matter of expectation.
Getting back to the whole Sam being Grand Maester, blah, blah, blah. One of the storylines that the show really just cut and never really approached is in the later books, they start giving these clues as to like a Maester conspiracy and that there really is a lot more to do with the Maesters. And they just skipped all that.
Yeah.
So I really did not care that
Yeah.
Sam was made Grand Maester. Like it just, yeah. Paulette says epilogues are usually anticlimactic, but that's really the point.
Yeah, I mean, it's if you look at the, that classic literary like tension graph, right? The rising tension up to the climax and then the denouement, right? It's like but in a story where it's all about world building, like I kind of want to have at least a little bit of a sense of what's next. And it doesn't have to be about setting up a sequel. Doesn't have to be about like leaving loose ends, but I just kind of like the idea that if a character is not dead, then presumably there's a next chapter in their life. And even if that chapter is not part of this story, just a little bit of this is where we leave them. I like that.
They have one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So in any event, I liked all that. We already talked about Brienne's, big scene with the book.
Yeah.
But just, the idea of that crew bickering around the table with, Bran showing up and them kind of, messing around, they don't quite have the routine down with their long may he reign bit. And they're like, we'll get better. And he's just like, I'm sure you will. And, and I liked all of that.
Yeah. I thought it worked well.
Right. And then Sansa getting to, be queen in the North.
Stark montage.
Yeah. Like I feel like I don't necessarily have a lot to say about it because I think we've all been on board with the idea that Sansa should be a ruler in the North. Like I think we're all on the same page for a while now. Yeah. So it's nice that it happens. But I don't necessarily have a lot to say about it.
Yeah.
Her dress is
that dress though. Those sleeves though.
I cannot wait to see people cosplay Queen Sansa.
Yeah.
Because that is just like the weirwood dress. Oh my God.
Yeah. Well, she had callbacks to Tully with the fish scales on the dress. And the color was blue, which was House Tully as well. It had the red leaves, like you're saying, from the Godswood, which those were beautiful. I mean, those were really, really beautifully done. And the crown was likened to the one that Cersei made with the two dire wolves on Sansa's instead of. But what did we notice if she had the big like circle?
I didn't see it.
She didn't have that on this time, right?
Not in that scene. She wore it when she was saying goodbye to John in this last scene where they were all together. She had it on.
Yeah.
That's a cool piece of jewelry. Yeah. I am generally immune to fashion stuff like that. Like that one, I saw it and I was like, I don't know, that corset part looks like it's really tight.
It was just really different.
Me beyond that.
It was just really different because we had Dany go from the light colors to the black. And we had Sansa go from nearly black all the time to this light blue dress. And it was like, it was really nice. And I think that I read that it even had some of the fabric that was used in Marjorie Tyrell's wedding dress. And it was kind of like she had taken something from all these lessons that she had learned from people. I thought it was really neat.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm certainly happy that people liked it. I guess I'm just, I'm too oblivious with fashion stuff. I don't know.
That's why I'll share.
I just really noticed
noticed
noticed the sleeves, the embroidery and the leaves and all that. And I thought
the leaves were cool. I liked the shot of it. Like it wasn't even when she was wearing it though. That was like the shot of the fabric unfurling before she put it on.
For me as a cosplayer, I pay attention to costumes because every time I see something like that, I think, how is that going to look in a cosplay? And that I am so excited to see in cosplay.
Yeah.
Paulette says the dress was to die for.
Yes.
And I love Arya asking what's west of Westeros and going on an adventure ship. I loved it. I liked it. I think it was appropriate for her to be an explorer.
I I love it, but I feel like there's some complexity to unpack a little bit there, and I'll come back to that in a second. I did like that the what's west of Westeros, nobody knows, I don't know, nobody knows. Like that was a callback to, I think it was a conversation she had with the actress, right?
Mhm.
In Bravos. And so I like that. And it's, just as dialogue goes, it's a good exchange. What's west of Westeros? I don't know.
Mhm.
Nobody knows. That's just good writing. I like it.
Mm.
What I will say is the complexity of her doing this is that it feels like this weird combination of two different, like both thematically coherent, but distinct thematic interpretations of what's happening. Because on the one hand, we could say that, following Sandor's advice, she has decided to live her life and not die in the pursuit of vengeance. And what does she want to do? Well, she's never going to be a lady. She wants to see new things and have adventures. And that's always the life she wanted. And so she is choosing life by going off and having adventures. She's going to find out things that nobody else knows. And I like that. And it feels right and coherent. But it's also impossible to completely avoid the overlap between like the Lord of the Rings and the idea that the elves and Frodo are going off to the west into the, to fade into the distance because their time has passed in this world. They can never go back again. And so they must depart. So I feel like I can see either of those work, and what happens like overlaps with the two, except that the two don't actually, like, they both line up with what happens, but they don't line up with each other. And I feel like it feels a little bit strange as a result.
I feel like people are always comparing everything to everything else, and Lord of the Rings is the next logical thing to compare this to. And I didn't think of it even for a second. I think Arya's journey is her own, and I don't think she was copying. I don't think that the writers were copying anything from Lord of the Rings. I think it's just a great finish for her.
Well, and to be fair, George will often make comparisons to Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
Because he reads it so often, and the RR that he put in his name is for Tolkien.
The thing is like, if it's not an intentional reference, it's a hell of a coincidence.
Yeah.
That a character that's been through as much as she had and struck the climactic blow to defeat a great evil, but now has seen too much to ever go home and be a normal person again, and then chooses to go with others into the West to unknown lands. Like, I mean, it's
similar, but I mean, I think,
it's very similar.
Okay. I think that they've been foreshadowing this for seasons for her.
Well, they have
a long time, and so I don't even care where it came from. I think it's perfect.
No, it's fine.
Yeah.
Like, I don't disagree with that. What I'm saying is I like both interpretations. It's just that both interpretations don't match each other, which feels weird.
Yeah.
So in the books, I feel like this what's west of Westeros thing is a little more driving. Brandon Stark, not the one we know, but one of the former Brandon Starks, actually did Arya's voyage and never came back. Some Iron Islanders have said that they've gone and seen it, but nobody's sure if they can believe him. I can't remember. Is it Euron who says that's what he wants to do? One of the big Greyjoys. It might be
maybe
one that's not in the show.
So the thing is like, I feel like if they really wanted to nail down the interpretation of it's just about exploring, it has nothing to do with the Lord of the Rings parallels. If that's what they wanted, what I think maybe they could have done is seed a couple of lines here and there that there maybe actually is reason to believe that there is something out there.
Yeah.
Whereas for now, we literally have zero idea. And even though it's cool to say nobody knows, literally that means is we're going to go off and sail into the ocean for what is possibly nothing. And we have no reason whatsoever to believe that there is anything that we will ever find out there, and we might all just die at sea.
What an awfully big adventure.
Well, yeah, but
And she
By
got
that
to pick it.
yeah. So you could also just jump off a cliff. That would be also a big adventure.
Yeah. She's kind of done that though when she was running around with the waif and Bravos.
Yeah, so I don't like so I'm not saying that I hate it. I'm not complaining about anything. It's more just a matter of there being parallels that seem too on the nose to be a total coincidence, and yet it muddies the thematic waters.
Not for me. I'm sorry that it's true for you.
All right. Well, you don't have to be sorry. I'm not sorry about it. I'm just interested.
There any other?
There was a question about didn't Tywin's brother also go there also and never come back? And I'm just looking it up.
Kevin?
No, Kevin was killed by little birds. Garion went on a quest to find House Lannister's ancestral Valyrian steel greatsword, Bright Roar, and any other treasures that might have survived the doom of Valyria. And then almost a decade after his ship, the Laughing Lion, left Lannisport, Garion never returned. So I think that might be what you're thinking of.
Yeah. Kevin was killed by Varys' little birds in the books, not the show. He died at the Great
He was
Sept.
at the Sept.
You're right.
When it blew up.
Sorry.
Yeah, in the show. That's all right.
Yeah.
These things blur together.
Okay, that wraps the series.
Yeah.
So we can officially say now our watch is ended.
Well, the other thing they could do to really nail down that Arya is going off to have adventures is by doing a sequel series of her adventures.
There you go.
I was going to say, is our watch ended? Because, I mean, there's other shows coming. We don't have to stop watching. Yeah. We don't have to podcast about it, but we don't have to watch it.
Well, and I do think that we're going to reconvene and do a series recap. And
no, I just meant our Game of Thrones watches ended.
And I would love to come back and talk to Chooch after he finishes the books, each of the books. So we've got a couple episodes there. And there's a documentary we can all watch next week. There's things, and then there's books.
Also, for those of you going to be at Balticon, we do have a panel. We're going to be
released. Yep. Paulette says, coming to HBO next year, Arya's voyage to the Westworld. Van D says, in the end, I kind of feel bad for all the 4-year-old girls out there whose mothers named them Khaleesi.
That'll teach you to name babies after pop culture characters whose stories aren't done yet.
Yes, and we actually talked about this before we started broadcasting, and I was like, you knew what you were getting in for.
I still feel bad for them. I still do.
No, I do. Yeah,
I think it sucks. They learned a lesson.
Khaleesi is better than Daenerys, I think, at this point, though. I feel like Khaleesi feels more generic. It's kind of like Queen, you know?
Yep, I agree.
But in any event, though, just as a total tangent, how great was that Westworld season 3 teaser?
So great. Yeah. So damn great.
Oh, man.
Goosebump great.
Excited for that.
Sneaky.
Yeah. Because I was when I was watching it is just, I was really like astounded. Is like, what is this show that we haven't heard anything about? And it's like, oh, the reason we haven't is because we have. It's because it's Westworld. So yeah, I thought that was really cool.
Whole new Westworld. Yeah.
There was a lot of great trailers because they
definitely
his Dark Materials looks pretty good.
Don't give up that subscription. Yeah. All right, look at this. Look at this shit. Watchmen.
Yeah.
We got your Deadwood.
We got your Westworld.
Yeah. Deadwood's going to be just a movie, but for sure.
That's what I'm waiting for.
I'm excited for that. Also, just want to say, it's like as we're recording tonight, they're having the 3rd episode of Just 5, but the Chernobyl miniseries is great. It is very good.
Mhm.
It is well,
go.
it's terrifying, is what it is. It's not like a supernatural horror movie. I mean, it's
It's a real life horror movie.
Historical fiction.
It's historical fiction. It's a retelling of real events, but there's some terrifying stuff in that particular history. Man, it's really good, but it's super intense.
So
Yeah. Anyway, sorry.
no. But now that our watch has ended, what are we
Yeah.
rating this?
Who has ratings?
Paulette said
Ooh.
Chernobyl is horrifying.
Yeah,
What was the name of this? The Iron Throne?
the Iron Throne.
The Iron Throne.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'll go first, and with the context that's important to keep in mind that my expectations coming in were pretty low for this episode. But given that, I was not just pleasantly surprised, but genuinely impressed with how well they pulled it off, given how bumpy the approach had been. And so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to give this one 9 out. Excuse me, suddenly coughing. Excuse me.
9 coughs out of 10.
Yeah, dude. I came out of nowhere. All right. I'm gonna just say I don't want it to just be happy endings. That feels weird. So what I'm gonna say is 9 out of 10. Funny but banal arguments for the small council to have.
All right, Chooch.
I similar to me, 9 out of 10 inches of John's steel in Danny's gut.
Oh. Oh.
You got me all excited.
It's like, well, wait, what?
Impeccably timed there, by the way.
Thank you.
Viv?
I'm gonna say, because I am still salty that I have to be this relieved that it was so good. I'm gonna say 8 out of 10. Shit, I don't know. 8 out of 10 something clevers. It's late. I got an early flight.
I'm right there with you, Viv. I am giving this 8 out of 10 smelted iron thrones. It was better than I had expected. I went into this thinking, oh boy. And you know what? It wasn't bad. It was a good finale. I'm happy with it. It's not my favorite finale, but it's up there. It's not, it's not even like top 3, but it's not even middle ground, it's still up there.
Yeah.
So, I mean, finales are hard. Endings
They
are hard.
They are.
Well, and show like this too, where a big part of its claim to fame is that it has just a billion different characters, and it's
exactly
this sprawling cobweb of interrelated characters and interactions and history and all that stuff. It's like that is hard to write.
Yeah.
So that's really my thing. So I'm pretty happy with I think an 8 out of 10 it's good. It's solid. It's enjoyable. It makes me happy. There are things I like, things I didn't like. We're good. So overall, we have collectively rated this 8.5 out of 10.
Great.
And so for the entire season, we've given a 7.8.
That's higher than I would have guessed. But I guess the first half of the season we weren't so mad yet.
Exactly. Yeah. So I mean, it's pretty good.
Yeah. One quick tangent. This is I know we're kind of trying to wrap things up, but I just remembered something that I really meant to address and forgot when we were talking about that scene, which is that although I totally understand from a certain perspective why Tyrion chose the name he did when he offered it, I've seen a bunch of people, disabled people online feeling really kind of upset that Bran the Broken is the big name they try to go for.
Well, and then there's also that Bran can't have kids. Well, how do you know?
Well, they have established on the show that
Yeah.
was true before.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
like that's not new information, but it also does kind of, it's not universally true of people who are in wheelchairs, right?
Yeah.
Like being in a wheelchair doesn't
Mhm.
automatically mean that you can't have
Exactly.
children. And so, it does kind of perpetuate, a stereotype potentially to address it without, the specifics. And then just Brand the Broken, like how cool is it to say we're going to have, a disabled king, except that they had to kind of taint it by not Brand the Seer, Brand the Raven,
Yeah.
Brand
Right.
something. It has to be Brand the Broken. Like,
Well,
and the thing is like, I'm not in a position where I'm like personally offended by that, but I get that point, and I think it's worth talking about.
I 100% get that point, and I am not
Mhm.
excusing it in any way, but especially in the books, there's Bran the Builder.
Yeah,
There's
it's all,
and there's a lot of alliterations with Bran. So I
yeah,
think it's leaning into that. But again, this is one of those intention is not the same as impact.
yeah.
You can go in with good intentions, and in this show, they can go in just being tone deaf and not even thinking, oh, what
Mhm.
might this say to disabled people?
Yeah,
Or to other people about disabled people, which is the real
Uh,
problem.
yeah.
The Eye of Horus says Bran the Blood Raven. Yeah. Yes.
Mhm. There you go.
So Paulette had rated this 8 of 10, stuck the landings after flubbing the freestyle routine.
Nice.
We didn't get one from Mike yet, but if he writes one in,
Yeah.
I'll add that in.
So, like the analogy that I had made to my friend Mike, even before watching the finale, was that if we want to equate the experience of having watched this whole series as a journey, that if we want to use that analogy, if you're making a journey and it's almost to the end and the flight is got a lot of turbulence coming in for a landing and it's really bumpy, that doesn't mean once you're on the ground that you're sorry you took the trip.
Yep.
And so that's kind of how I felt about it. But how much of a relief was it nonetheless to say we experienced some turbulence, but then on the whole, we came in for a much smoother landing than we thought we might.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
And we'll get into the nitty-gritty of this, but if anyone is interested, this season actually our ratings tie with the worst season. This and season 5 are rated the lowest. But if you think that we rated our 2 lowest seasons as 7.8 out of 10,
Right.
that's pretty
Well,
darn impressive.
That says a lot. Yeah.
Well, yeah, statistically, we are a self-selected population. It doesn't make
Yeah.
for a very good sample. We are
But it's
people who have chosen to record a podcast about the show.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But yeah,
But this is more to anybody who says, all I do is
Well,
complain about the show.
but the other thing is that, although lots of people are complaining about, this season, it's got its highest ratings ever. Everyone wanted
Yeah.
to see how it finished, even though they were mad about parts of it.
And if you watch
18
last week
point
tonight,
something million.
Yeah.
John Oliver's been like making really fun meta jokes. I think my favorite was the other night I was watching and it was like, yeah, after the finale, this network is fucked.
Yeah. I had HBO before Game of Thrones. I'll have HBO
Right.
after
There's
Game
a
of
lot
Thrones.
of
Yeah.
people. I am one of those. I got HBO specifically for this. I turn my subscription on when the series starts and I turn it off when it's done. I'm going to hang on till Deadwood, but you know what? Keep writing awesome stuff and bring me back, HBO.
Yeah. Those of you who have HBO Go or access to it should check out Barry if you haven't already. That's another great show that the first season is okay. Like I like it, but second season turns into just some really incredible TV.
Did you say Barry?
Barry,
B-A-R-R?
B-A-R-R-Y. Yeah.
Okay.
It's with the Bill Hader, I think is the actor's name.
Oh,
And the
okay.
whole
On
concept
SNL.
of it is that
Yeah.
he is this he's a hitman that starts taking acting classes in LA. And he's kind of
Okay.
struggling with all he really knows is killing people, but he's always been kind of really closed off emotionally. And so these acting classes are helping him get in touch with his emotions, which at the same time makes him feel increasingly complicated about his work as a hitman.
All right. Okay.
And the thing is, the show is good in the first season, but like I said, second season really starts to do some really incredible stuff. And in particular, there's one episode in season 2 where it's like a surrealistic masterpiece. It's really amazing.
Cool.
I've never seen anything like it.
So we'll have another episode from Balticon in the feed.
Yep.
Yes,
Pay attention.
we've got the live show Saturday night. I'm getting on a plane super early tomorrow. So hopefully we'll finish up soon.
Yeah.
But
I'll be,
we've got the Balticon show Saturday night at the Renaissance Baltimore Hotel. Balticon, there is an entry fee to get in, but there's so many amazing things. So if you can come by.
Balticon's great.
That's
And
May 25th
It's
this weekend,
cheap compared to other
Memorial Day
conventions.
weekend.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry,
I'm
Chooch.
sorry, Chooch. Can you say that again? I spoke over you.
That is May 25th, Memorial Day weekend this weekend
Yep.
in Baltimore, Maryland.
Yeah. Viv and I will be there, and we'll be we'll welcome guest stars Billy Flynn and the Flintress. The Flintress.
It will be awesome. And as I was saying before, like, if you're in the area, go. A day pass is pretty cheap. And don't think of it like other conventions. So many times I've had people tell me like that they always wanted to go to Balticon, but they just couldn't afford it. And then when they actually go, they're like, this is all it costs, because they were thinking Dragon Con pricing.
Oh yeah.
This is not a Comic Con or Dragon Con pricing. This
No
is
big
actually
media
affordable.
stars. Yeah, no big giant media stars. Not big. I'm saying big giant media stars. We're not going to have Cersei Lannister walking around the Harbor Hotel.
Maybe in cosplay.
Oh, definitely in cosplay. She'll be all up over that bitch.
Oh, yeah.
So Paulette will be in the audience. You'll get to talk to some of our contributors.
Yeah.
And it should be fun. And then if they pay attention to specficmedia.com or the Facebook page, they should know when we are going to come back and maybe do a series recap. And
and sometime the next few weeks, we'll probably do a whole series recap of all of everything we saw and talk about what's coming up next for us.
And we'll talk about our predictions that we stored.
Yeah.
We'll leave that as a taste. Who won? Who lost?
Sounds good.
You could just go back and listen to that episode, but you don't want to. You want to hear us talk about it.
And I've collected some fan theories, 2 of them.
Nice.
So, there we go. All right.
Cool. All right. Thanks everybody for joining us. You'll be hearing from us very, very soon. Hey, that's the wrong one again.
It's a tradition now.
Right?
I love this so much.
If you have feedback for the Beyond the Wall podcast, you can email us at btw@specficmedia.com. You can also leave us a comment on the website. Go to specficmedia.com, where you'll find a shiny BTW button. That'll take you right to our page. This podcast is released under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, Share-alike 3.0 Unported license. Feel free to share and remix. Just give us credit and don't charge money for it.